All right, Council, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, the time is 6:05 p.m. I'm calling into order a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. In this, just a couple of upfront announcements since we won't have staff reports this month. We actually thought we were going to have quite a rather full agenda, so we defer staff reports. There are three things I want to call out to residents just for awareness. There are upcoming events. This Friday night, we have another game night. It's being sponsored by the CED committee, and that's going to be at City Hall. So intended to be a community event where you can get together with your neighbors and play games and just enjoy socializing and that activity. The next one is that we also have a town hall on Monday for the comprehensive plan. So just an awareness for residents who want to provide input into that process. And can we also send out a reminder email? That'd be great, yeah. And then the last, of course, is Arts Fest is coming up, not this weekend, but the weekend after this. It's a major event for the city and, a big celebration of the return to Arts Fest after a 2-year hiatus. So please go out and support the city, and visit with the volunteers and also support the vendors that are going to be there. We're looking forward to having that event and hopefully growing it year over year to become, again, the premier event for the city, for the culture that we want to promote here. So that's going to be on next Saturday on, not this weekend, but the following weekend. So with that, we'll open it up for citizen public communication. And if you do have a comment for a later agenda item, you can fill out a comment card to get your place for that agenda item, or you can also just speak to the agenda item. We'll make sure that there's a time for public comments for later agenda items. If you want to speak in general, now's the time to do it, or if you don't think you'll be here for a later agenda item, you can also use this time to speak as well in public comments. So with that, we'll start with the people who are lined up, and then of course, turn on the microphone and state your name and proceed from there. There you go.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I want to speak to the work session that just happened, because I had a lot of areas of concern about that. The first one, 500K, and we said after that we were going to pass those things along and pass extra costs along. And one of the things that happened with the previous mayor was that the subsidy in a way that bypassed that. And so that's a concern that we do that, and I think we need to plug that hole so that we don't keep doing it. When we had the long-range financial plan, we made sure that we weren't going to run into trouble, and we usually said we would evaluate it. We have not evaluated for over 2 years because of COVID, and that causes me concern. So one, when I hear numbers like 918, when I know we had decided to be around 5, and we'd already could possibly creep to 7, that causes me concern. And then when we look at the long-range financial plan and we're using new items that are coming in and new funds that are not incorporated that, and we haven't evaluated it in 2 years, I really think we need to. Our current finance committee is down to bare bones with 5 people. And so the idea of suggesting the long-range financial plan, and it tends to happen after the budget. And when we're considering new things, I think we need to consider it ahead of time in order to have a more effective discussion. I think you're having a good discussion, but I think if we don't have those long-range financial plan numbers in this discussion, we're going to hurt ourselves later, even though right now is a flush year. But we all see a crash coming, right? And so right now we're flush with cash. Oh, great. But we're looking at long-range financial plan numbers. I think we may need to consider another long-range planning committee like we had with Michael Francis and Richard Hayes and JR, I think, who left. But I think it would behoove council to have people who are really financially savvy look at that, because I don't know that right now with budget starting and 5 people on budget that they're going to be able to do just that on the front end, and I think somebody should. So I just toss that out there listening to your comments. And so subsidy numbers, accurate ones, I agree with Councilmember Johnson. I'm not clear, and I've looked a long time and I'm still not clear. And I won't usually throw up my hands about it. I'm saying I'm not clear. And the number I had was in the 7s. And so those are the things that occurred to me that I just wanted to put out. Thank you all for your consideration. Much appreciation.
Thank you. Helen?
Hello, Helen Bessie, 795 Oakdale. Thanks for listening and thanks for being here. I have actually comments on 3 agenda items, so I'll just give you 2 quickly now and then save the other one when that comes up. 8, the possible action on utilizing open town hall for public comments for city council and public meetings. I just had an experience this afternoon. I was writing a comment. I must say, I was eloquent in what I was saying. And then I got to the end, and some little thing popped up, and it said something that I didn't know what it meant, either that or reject. So I thought, well, I better save it. And my comment went away completely. I have nothing but trouble with that. It never seems to like my password, even though it's all written down, and I put it in, and it makes me change it if I don't get on it often enough. And it's just a very frustrating experience. So if you can do it another way by having the comments on the website with some kind of an easy link for those of us who aren't crazy about computers and databases and all those different things, it would be so, so helpful. So that, and then on 9, which I believe is, oh yes, the possible action on City Hall as a community center. I really applaud that you're investigating that, and I hope that you move forward with it. I just wanted to add that, and this may be way premature, to look at the space out here where we used to have the music venues and different things, and I think we could utilize that space a lot more. I think of, well, I think they've had movie nights here, I'm not sure, but movie nights outside like they used to have in Zilker Park, perhaps they still do, I don't get out much. The movie nights outside, or maybe a small fenced area for the little kids can go and play and not have to be completely supervised, with a couple little things for them to play with. I see your swings are gone. My feet would never touch the ground because I'm short, so I'm kind of glad they're gone. But putting something out there where it's more of a situation where people can sit in a square, a circle or something, so that you can have group meetings in nice weather, or just sit around as groups instead of just in swings facing the beautiful scenery. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to comment?
Hello, my name's Dan Horrigan. I represent 3 Pillar Road. I'd like to talk briefly about my brother who was shot 5 times by a .50 caliber weapon in Iraq. He was searching for weapons of mass destruction the entire time he was there, and him and his team, well, he did not, but his team member took Saddam out of the hole by his hair, told him he was under arrest. George W. Bush sends his regards. Okay, my brother did all that for a man's wealth, for oil, because he certainly didn't do it for freedom. And tonight we're going to be talking about an emergency intervention and how desperately this town is in need of that emergency intervention, and it is in need of the people's paying. They need to pay attention to the city council, the council at hand. Man, freedom of information has been denied to me. Free speech equals 4 minutes. The due process and the elements of the law in my discovery was obstructed at the door by the city secretary. I don't know what's going on here, but the obstruction of justice started at the Collins era administration. It has not stopped. There's some corruption amongst the Mayor Bruner, the administrative staff, Sylvia Carrillo, and your city secretary, Matt, over here. I do not want to pronounce his last name at the moment. I come to visit before the judge. This is the second try to visit the judge or the attorney, and Matt's got a banana on his shirt that's iron on there, and it's a big banana while the judge is visiting. So could we please look at a dress code for this town? That's something that is very much need to be looked at. The blue box, it has disappeared, but it could further haunt me. It could easily come back at any period of time. There's been no definitive action upon that. We're about to meet the judge. I was obstructed. My justice was denied. There's deceit, pixie dust, and fairy poof. You can identify to mistruths and lies. The three of you need to step down. I'd like to know that one of you has enough gall to pick out that one person amongst each other. You can figure out, not Matt, he needs to leave anyway. I'll get to that eventually. Sylvia, the chief of police, or Bruner, you need to figure out which one of you needs to step down. You know, I wasn't even talking to the city secretary. He wants to know my entire story and the discovery that needs to be displayed before the attorney, the judge. Kent Johnson, I've known you my entire life, fella. Step out of the shadows and come to talk to me. You should be concerned that this has gone on for 16 years. Well, this guy here, Pro Tem Mayor, gets to call me a racist, a misogynist. You people, my brother died, man. There are people fighting and dying for your right to what? Pass another law? You work it out, remove this guy, and you figure out which one of the three needs to be out of here. And I don't really, favor any of you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who wish to speak?
Love you all. Happy Easter. Belated Easter.
Ooh, tough act to follow. My name is Lisa. I live on Pillow Road. I wanted to come here to express my gratitude to Councilmember Litchfield and Councilmember Johnson for opening up agenda item 7, I believe it is, that they sponsored this evening. I also wanted to make sure that we were going to have public comments before that section. I have been given a letter from one of the residents that she's asked me to read.
Yes, as part of our discussion, we'll make sure that there's public comments
Okay.
for that agenda item. Generally, we will open with a presentation by staff and then a discussion among council, and then we'll open up for public comments at that time.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak at this time? All right. That'll take us to item number 3, which is council consideration of agenda items for approval on consent. If there's any items that we wish to approve on consent, now it's time to nominate them. Councilmember Rosengart.
I move to approve on consent agenda item number 4, number 5, and number 6.
So the motion to approve on consent number 4, number 5, and number 6. Is there a second for that? Or anybody, second from Councilmember Litchfield? Anybody wish to remove any of those items?
It's a very nerdy thing. I'm going to pull 4. I
Okay.
wasn't here for that meeting, so.
So we're not approving on consent item number 4 because Councilmember Councilmember Johnson was not here, and he wants to make sure that he doesn't approve it on consent with his vote. So with that, any other items which should be pulled from number 5 and number 6? All those in favor of approving item number 5 and number 6 on consent, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. We approved on consent. Consider an act on approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 31, aligning standing committees and Arts Commission appointments with the fiscal year. And item number 6, consider an act on approval of an ordinance amending fiscal year 2022 budget as recommended, or budget amendment R7 as recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee. And that'll bring us to item number 4. Councilmember Rosengart.
I move to approve agenda item number 4, minutes of April 5th, work session and council meeting.
Is there a second for that? Councilmember Reitz?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving item number 4, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, item number 4, the minutes from last April 5th, 2022 meeting are approved. And council, that'll take us to our presentation items. Item number 7, presentation, discussion, and possible action on initiating zoning amendments for the following city-owned properties. Property A, which is 6107 Brody Lane, property B, which is 6401 Brody Lane, and property C is 37 Lone Oak Trail. And we'll start with a background presentation by staff, and then we'll let the sponsors also speak as part of this as well if they want to give any additional information.
All right, Mayor and Council, good evening. So the 3 properties in question are 6107 Brody Lane, which is also known as the Barron's property. That was the property most recently purchased by the city. 6401 Brody Lane, also known as the Galt property, which was purchased by the city back in 2008. And then 37 Lone Oak Trail. So before a zoning change can be initiated, and again, these are all 3 city-owned properties. According to our own code, which is section 150.064B2. So zoning changes are initiated by the city council and they shall not become effective without first giving notice and hearings. But what this item would do is the action on this item would not change the zoning. It would just allow and authorize the mayor and city staff to begin a potential zoning amendment to one of these three properties. You know, you could not take any action tonight. You could just initiate change on one of them. You could do all three. Also, it would be what zoning designation you would wish to change the zoning to. So there are three zoning designations potential. One is P, parkland. Then there is G, green space or preservation district. And then C, conservation district. And the details of those were provided in your backup, and we can answer any questions you may have for those. If council elects to initiate the zoning change, what then would happen is staff would prepare a zoning, basically a report and an application. A public hearing notice would be issued, and that would go before the zoning commission, and then zoning commission would make their recommendation ultimately to city council, where you would adopt the zoning change. So, yeah, you're starting the process to ultimately come back to council for final decision. So, we'll be happy to answer any questions you have about that process. Yeah.
And Councilmember Litchfield and Councilmember Johnson, if you want to, as sponsors, if you want to add anything to that, please do so, or if we want to just open up for questions.
Yeah, to my mind, this is just cleaning up kind of a long-term liability that the city's been accruing as we've been acquiring these properties with the venue tax. I think it's time that we start kind of just taking care of this, because I know that it has been kind of a topic of contention before around some of the uses of some of these. So I think it's really important that we kind of just get these into some sort of a protected status, so that we kind of take what would be most offensive to most people off the table, which would be selling them. And we say, like, look, we are very committed to using these as intended. The intention was always to use these properties for, you know, conservation, green space, protection of the aquifer. And I think that it's very important that we act affirmatively to move that along. I think that we can discuss the nature, and I'd love a little bit of clarity. So if today if we vote to approve an application, do we have to decide right now which designation we apply for each of the properties?
Yes. So that is definitely required for a zoning change. You don't necessarily have to have a plan of what you're going to do. You know, that would be helpful, but, you know, at this stage, but, you know, I know the city is currently going through the Parks and Open Space, you know, plan, but yes, you must designate what zoning category you wish to change. So, and then just one more. I know it's been mentioned several times. It was mentioned, I believe, during a couple zoning commission meetings we've had lately, and I believe even the Board of Adjustment discussed it because the Galt property came up during the last Board of Adjustment meeting when the applicants were from 6401 were asking for their, or excuse me, 6405 were asking for their variance. But under the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 253, oh, yeah. Let me pull this up. Where's my HDMI? So, sorry, all the legalese. But, so right here, so, and subsection B, land owned, held, or claimed as a public square or park may not be sold unless the issue of the sale is submitted to the qualified voters of the municipality at an election and is approved by a majority of the voters received at the election. So there is in the local government code. And then there's also under chapter 26, which this is the state code, there's also additional language regarding protected lands. But this section here under Chapter 253 applies to the city of Sunset Valley. There are a lot of exceptions later on, but those are all for home ruled cities, which we are not. So, and I did, Barbara's here. So Barbara and I spoke today. And yeah, so any questions you have regarding that, we'll be happy to answer.
You want to speak to this item before opening up for general discussion?
No, I don't have like any like statement about it, but I do have like thoughts on each, like where the zoning should go for each of the individual properties.
Okay. Let's start with Councilmember Rosengarten, and then we'll open it for other council members.
I move that this agenda item be tabled. This agenda item is putting the cart before the horse. We have set $50,000 aside for a consulting firm to work on an open space master plan, and we have yet gotten that done. Before we change zoning on the open spaces in question, we want to have a city-wide survey. We want to have town hall meetings with all of the residents. We have an Parks and Open Space ad hoc committee to then review the suggestions and make recommendations to council with the properties as they are zoned.
So the motion is to table this item. Is there a second for that
To
motion?
follow the process that I mentioned.
And bring it back once the process has been followed. Is there a second for that?
Yeah, I will second. I think it's critical that we follow the process that we have started. We have paid a consultant $50,000 to go through and look at all of our lands and go through all of that and get input from all of our residents. And I think that's an important process to follow. I understand that. I think it's time to get it done. I get that. And so, yes, I get that too. But I think it has to be a complete process where we get good resident input from everyone.
There's a motion on the table which has been seconded, so let's open that up for discussion. Councilmember Rosengarten?
Which is the property that's the Barron's property? Is that 6401 Brody? Yes. 6401 is
Wait,
somebody
no,
else.
sorry. 6401 is the Galt. 6107 is the Barron's,
6107
which is
the
what
Barron's
was just
property. Nobody knew that
purchased.
we were buying this property except for council. So
Right.
for anybody to say, hey, we need to get this done now, is information that is incorrect, because nobody knew we were going to buy it. We bought it because the majority of the property is in the critical water quality zone. There is still a portion of this property that could be viable for an uplands property. That doesn't mean it has to. That doesn't mean anybody on council is thinking about selling land right now. But it's always nice to have, as I refer to, another option one day. It doesn't have to be today, it doesn't have to be in the next 5 years. It could be an option that maybe the city needs in the next 40 years, but they don't have to have it restricted at this time. That's my opinion. And if you go to the map so you can show everybody where it is. 6107 Brody, there it is. The house is at the very front. The very front part of it is the one that is in the critical water quality zone. The back of the corner, hard to do a lot except maybe a single family residence on it. But again, nobody's talking about selling it. Nobody's talking about doing anything with it. It's just nice to leave it alone and have it as maybe one day we might have a better option with it. And yes, we can take the whole thing and add it to, because it does connect to the Greenbelt, so that property would have a better option to have a good portion of it cut off and added to the Southern Hills Conservation Area. Then you go over and you look at the other properties, 6401 Brody. If we could come up with a solution as to how you connect it to the other green space, would be an avenue we would need to discuss first and research first. At this time, there's no way to connect it to any other green space. So right now, anyone would have to drive down Brody, turn around on Brody, park on the Ann Galt property in order to walk around this rectangle, busy, noisy rectangle, hearing all the traffic on Brody, and then go back home. It would be nice to be able to walk to it, walk onto the trails with a connecting trail. Those are my two concerns on those two properties. Thank you.
Councilmember Reeds?
Yeah, and I would just add on that property, it'd be nice to have a purpose for it. It would be hard pressed for anyone to go and make that effort to go there without some type of purpose. And I guess that's what the whole idea of this open space planning process was about, where they would do an inventory of all of our property and then come with the best ideas. In fact, you had a suggestion on the other property of perhaps that is parking for, instead of parking on Oakdale, that could be the parking area, which is a good suggestion. So all of these things are great suggestions, and so we need to just work through those, and this is just putting the cart before the horse just a little too quickly. And I think it's essential that we follow our process.
I'm a little bit concerned or confused because we are asking to follow the process. So it's saying, let's put together an application, let's send it to the zoning committee, it's gonna have a public hearing, it's gonna like go through all of these things, and we're gonna make a decision. All we're saying is like, let's start the process, like let's initiate the process. We understand that it will change, like we can get some finer grained detail, but we're just asking to initiate the process. And so, yeah, that's what we want to do, rather than like discuss, the individual uses of individual plots of land. But then I thought that the motion on the table, or the motion before us is to table it. But now all of a sudden we're asking about like whether or not we're gonna, like how we're gonna use each piece of land, which is like not speaking to the motion. So I'm a little bit confused here. Should we vote on the motion to table it and then discuss the nature of the properties if it doesn't pass, or like maybe like procedurally, just
So
like close that loop?
We can have a discussion, but we can also vote on a motion and then have another motion to continue, if, depending on what happens, right? So if the motion is tabled, then we move on to the next agenda item. But this is our discussion option. And I also want to make sure that the public has a chance to, in case that happens, the public has a chance to provide their input too, because if we table it, there's no option for them to. So I want to open it up for discussion. That's primarily why we're having the discussion now. Yeah. Councilmember Johnson.
So I get, and Richard Hayes' comment was basically that, what you're saying.
That's the
And
process we
I
already have,
I
yes.
totally get that. If we say, hey, zoning, we want to, initiate this process, is there any deadline in which they have to like hear it? So that 45 days from like when we vote on it, they would have to.
So you would start the application. I think what Councilmember Reeds and Rosengarten are saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you guys are going to request that the mayor submit application for these particular categories to the zoning commission for zoning commission to vote on. I think the issue is that when the Parks and Open Space Master Plan comes up again and they perhaps have a different zoning designation, we will go through another rezoning. I think that, am I correct in saying that's the process that you want to avoid? You want to just go one time to zoning commission?
Yes, and I don't want to circumvent resident input. I mean, that's the main thing to me, is that, this is already, zoning will be contentious. This will be contentious. And I think it needs adequate time that our residents get to think about it, get to comment on it, and not on a quickly 45-day process get it through. I think we should do it thoughtfully and appropriately.
So back to my question, if we vote tonight, zoning has 45 days to hear, or it, in government, sometimes we kind of, it's like, oh, government runs slowly. What I saw this as is just like, there are parallel things that we can do. Like that group is not going to be done in 45 days, right? So if we're on a clock, once we vote tonight, then I'd be amenable to table it. Like I can call it right now what all three are going to go as. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just like, it's pretty obvious, because like one is next to green space, one is next to conservation, and one is not connected, so it's more like a park. So it's like, and And the one where you can say like, well, should it be a park? When that was bought, that was the agreement. So it's just like, that's the one where it's just like, I agree, maybe it's kind of like off in this no man's land, but that was the agreement. So, and if you listen to the Board of Adjustments, it was just like, there's a lot of, over my dead body, would that, you know, not be used for that, because that was kind of like, I mean, there's many things running through my head about not using that for like what it was kind of purchased for. But, so again, we have 45 days, or zoning.
Let's ask to the, so Barbara, if council chose, because our code says, you know, the zoning commission, I believe it even says shall, I'll have to pull it up, shall hold a hearing within 45 days to process the application, but, you know, council could direct us to, I mean, could they direct their motion to say, I don't know, I guess I'm looking for a.
You do have mandatory timeframes within your zoning code as far as how, once you start the process, you do have a period of time to get it wrapped up. And I'm hearing kind of two things that you all are saying. One is that because you've started this process of doing kind of a master plan of the parks and recreation facilities, or the potential parks and recreation type of items, that property that you have, that you would like to allow the public to go through that process and have a say on all 3 lots. Yes, I understand that, you know, Board of Adjustment certainly has made some statements about certain things, but that's Board of Adjustment and that's not the City Council. And it's certainly not the citizens of the community. You know, so you do have a variety of things that are kind of going on, and you're juggling. And I think that if you, and I get you want to kind of move forward with certain things so that, and maybe, Councilman, maybe this is my question that I'd like, before I give the rest of the answer, to know. What is it that you think needs to move forward now so that, I mean, is it all 3 properties that you need, or that you're thinking of, or is it one of them, or what is it that you're thinking that you would like to perhaps see moved forward?
So I will counter with another question to you. No. Sorry, no, but so in my mind, and there is this concept of spot zoning, and as I am not a lawyer, I tried to read like what it said.
No,
it's just like,
please don't say that.
well, no, well, you know, I read it and it's just like singling out. So it's just like, when are we, like, if we just did it for one piece of property, is that considered, that, like, I am a very simple man, so like, is it like, because it was just change, city initiated zoning on one property, that it passes that, or is it like?
Well, that's, I think that's also part of what I am thinking, that you have a process, which is that master plan process of what is the parks and recreation facilities that you have. Once you have that, so all zoning, first off, let me kind of back up a bit, because this perhaps will help. You have a comprehensive plan. Everything zoning-wise is supposed to flow from that comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan can have components of it, one of which might be your parks and recreational facilities. Once you have a good, solid plan in place as to what you want to see with your parks and rec, or your green space, or whatever it is, then you put that out there. You get all the input from your community. You get everybody to, you know, try and buy in and let you know what you're going to do and everything. And then you vote on it. You've had charrettes. You've had the whole 9 yards. Everybody's had their chance to say something, and they've come to the table and they're saying it. You vote on it ultimately, that's your comprehensive plan, and the component to it is a master plan for your parks. When you have that, that directs then where your zoning will go. That, everything you do from there on out will, okay, this area here along Brody, it abuts a green space. So that's your logical place that you need to put another park, or you need to combine that piece of property to make it a park. Then you have maybe this one over here that says, okay, that would be a logical extension of, you know, the trail system. And so we'll do that. So it is a cart and horse thing from a zoning category, from a zoning process. I would say that if you don't have a good comprehensive plan and park land plan, that's the best thing for you to start with if it's at all possible. Now, there may be some times when you know that logic is just, no, that's what that's going to be. And if that's the case, then you might be able to say that's what that's going to be. It's not spot zoning at that point. It's the extension of a logical next piece in that dominoes, so to speak. It's the next piece there that makes it all come together or something. So those are the things that as a planner and as zoning, that's what you look at. And I think that's some of what some of you are saying. Let's get that process going. Let's get that plan brought forward. And others are saying, well, we can maybe take some baby steps and go here and do a little bit here and maybe over here. But again, without maybe a full comprehensive understanding of what you as a community want, it may be a little premature. Did that make sense?
Yes. So just wanted to remind the council, so last council meeting, Carolyn and staff updated you all on the comprehensive, so Barbara was correct and all of that. So, but we have before us a, revised, updated comprehensive plan that the P&E committee has been working on for, I think, over a year now. And so that, if we stick with the schedule, there's going to be a town hall meeting. I don't believe a future land use map has been, we have our old future land use map, the current future land use map from 2011. But a new future land use map will be adopted when the new comprehensive plan is, hopefully adopted by, we have that scheduled for possible adoption on June 21st. So if you look at the current future land use map, just as a reminder, and I should have included this in the backup, it does show the Galt property 6401 as, of course, it doesn't designate which of the three, but it says Parkland Green Space Conservation, as well as 37 Lono. It does not show 6107. So that is the city's current future land use map that, of course, you're not bound by, but this is what was adopted when the comprehensive plan was last adopted.
So that stopwatch is the only thing that will sway me to
But it's from submission, right? And so, right, it may take Mark and staff 15 days to submit it, right? But, it may take 6 months. I don't know. So, and then from that point, it's the 45 days. So that said, we should designate, if we need to dictate in this decision which of those zones it will be, so where I am is that the idea of holding it in our back pocket so that we can sell it someday is unworkable. The language of everything here is literally, it's for the acquisition of property, not to start REITs of our own, personal real estate investment trust, right? That just doesn't work. So that has to come off the table just in general. That said, I would be very comfortable waiting for the comprehensive plan to designate these more accurately so that we can that just goes through in one shot, because what I would be inclined to do now is just say everything's a park, because that's the least restricted, and that gives us more options. But then someday, you know, somebody like ratcheting that down one level in 6 months would be very, very hard if we've already moved it to a park, right? Like, there's gonna be no inertia to do that. I would rather have a lot of flexibility, because I think the park restrictions are fine, but that's me, and I know that other people will feel much more strongly that it should be a conservation district, because that makes it so that we could only have like endemic trees, and I want to plant peach trees everywhere, or whatever, right? Like, I want to have more flexibility, but understand that the comprehensive plan and other people might want, you know, less flexibility. So I would be comfortable, you know, kind of withdrawing this until we get the comprehensive plan back.
Thank you.
I do want to make sure the public gets a chance to speak to this item and get their input as we weigh any decision before we take a vote. So with that, unless there's any further questions from council, we'll invite members of the public that wish to speak to this item to step up to the mic.
I would like to speak to the item of the topic to table this. One of the reasons I think it's important not to table this tonight is because the work that we're going to be doing in the open space ad hoc committee is going to be based on these decisions. So we cannot plan for a single family lot. You know, we would rather know right now, is it parkland? Is it green space? Is it conservation land? That way that will inform our decisions going forward in the ad hoc committee. And I know that the vice chair also supports that idea. And just to make sure that it goes in line with what the 2010 or 11, I believe, future plan had recommended. Also, I mean, that was voted by council. There was a lot of back and forth on that, and a lot of work was done on that, and I don't think we should just throw away past work that was done. I just wanted to say that as chair of the committee. I think it would be really helpful to know how to plan those spaces and what their zoning designation is in order to plan those spaces. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak?
Can I ask a question for the next? So how long is that ad hoc committee? Like, when is? Because it's like, if you can talk about it at the back, you know, we might be able to, like, you know, you can work on other stuff, and then it's just like, while this is like moving through, and then it's like, I don't know what their approach is. So it's just like, are you?
If we can know council's recommendation for those pieces of land, we'll be finished in August with the plan.
Okay.
Yes, I'm on this. Is it on? Okay. I'm on the same ad hoc committee as the vice chair, and I respectfully disagree with what she is asking for. I think that the consultants that we have hired are professionals. We were part of the, not the approval process, but we did look at their qualifications and rate them. They're highly qualified. They're going to be asking all of us what we want, not what a committee wants or 2 or 3 people want. And it just seems to me premature to be changing zoning designations at this point in time. And it seems like I keep thinking there's something else on the agenda that I'm not getting. And so, and of course I can't go there. Like, the other thing that's disturbing is that in the executive committee or session tonight, you're going to be talking about selling a city property. Well, of course, I don't know what city property that is. So it's like, well, wait a minute, it's not? Did I read that completely wrong?
I think it always says like the same thing. It's like, these are the things that could potentially be talked about. I also don't know what we're talking about.
We are, so council, we will have an executive session tonight to talk specifically in the language is, you know, it is a specific agenda item, which is offer for potential sale and development of real property. So there is an executive session to discuss something in executive later tonight. So
yeah, that you're going to take some of the city's real property and discuss whether you should sell it or not. So that's the other thing that I found very disturbing. So if parkland is the only thing that can protect land from you're selling it without our vote, then yeah, I want parkland everywhere. But at the same time, there aren't enough restrictions on parkland to protect the South Hills or to make that stay native habitat and conservation, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're going to do, and if you can, I don't know if you can, come up with some rules where all those properties, if you're going to sell them or consider selling them, that every property that we own that is conservation, parkland, whatever, that the voters get a chance to have input. Not that you would listen to it, but just that we get to have a chance to have the input so that you don't come up and sell something that you don't sell Lone Oak. And it was like, wait, what happened? I thought there was supposed to be a park there. So that's it. I'm just those two items on the agenda just really freaked me out. So yes, please wait for your consultants who are professionals. They know what they're doing. They can help us make those decisions. Thank you.
Hey, John Papola, 40 Pillow. I think procedurally we're talking about the whether or not to table this. So I know Lisa had posted something on OpenGov that I think is worth considering, which is my understanding is that at least I have a personal stake in what happens with 37 Lone Oak. It's like adjacent to our property as well as several others in the neighborhood. So with that in mind, my understanding is that that property in particular, and perhaps one, if not both of the Brody, were purchased with the venue tax dollars, or were financed by the venue tax dollars, which I think is colloquially called the green tax, but it's technically, I think, a venue tax as per like the local government code in the Texas law. So my reading of that is that it's quite restricted, as in it's restricted not even to park space, but to a Edwards Aquifer Watershed Protection Program, which is conservation only. So I don't think there's a lot of discretion. I don't read any discretion actually on 37 Lone Oak. So I'm just curious why it's being discussed as if there's discretion, when it seems like the only thing that can be done with that property is zone it or use it as conservation, because that's how it was financed through the tax that was passed explicitly, very clearly with the acquisition and development of watershed protection green space lands, so not a park, which could have all kinds of things on it, but specific. It doesn't seem like there's a discretionary thing where consultants can come and say, hey, turn that into a park. Like, it doesn't look like that's permissible. Am I misunderstanding that? I'd love that clarified, because I went back and read all these propositions, and it seemed pretty cut and dry.
Okay, just to give you some background, 37 Lone Oak was purchased with general fund money. It was not purchased with green tax. When we had to find money in budget and finance in order to finance the city facilities, pay for the city facilities, because we didn't finance it, we then, actually, Mr. Rosengarten, Randy Rosengarten, came up with the idea. He says, well, since you purchased this property with general fund, can you then use the venue tax to then swap the funds? The answer was yes. So then we purchased it with venue tax. So originally it was not purchased with venue tax, but bottom line, it's now purchased with venue tax.
Yeah, that's my current understanding.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, how does that not narrowly restrict the use of that property, barring perhaps a sale, which seems like perhaps you could sell it, but those funds would have to come back into the green tax fund, would be my assumption, although it's not clear that there's not a lot of language for how that would work.
And here's where I can give you some more info. Matt and Carolyn, you were here at that time. We purchased Countrywide. Did we purchase it with venue tax or general fund? And then we sold off a portion of it to one of our residents right now. And that became our only city-owned property on Countrywide.
I believe that is true. I think the city did purchase Countrywide with venue tax.
Correct.
Then subdivided the property and sold the property.
Correct.
And where did the
I thought
funds from the proceeds of the sale, did they go back into the green tax fund?
Goes back into the venue tax.
Okay.
Yes.
And
that allowed us then to purchase another property. Like, we bought the Barron's property because we had enough money in the venue tax to do that.
That sounds dangerously like running an investment fund.
Well, I guess my question is, Am I correct
We
that
use
the,
legal in order to do it. I didn't do it.
I've been in the crypto industry, and you can find a lawyer that can tell you that you can't do anything, and they will defend you. And like,
Well,
you
just-
don't,
just-
it doesn't
I-
always mean it's good,
for
right?
my own understanding, which
I wouldn't do
Let's
it
let,
again.
let's let the resident
Yeah,
speak.
just for clarity, because it's, I mean, obviously you got, you were here and your
Yes.
husband was part of it.
Yes.
So am I correct that the proposition that created the green tax restricted the use of green tax funds for the Edwards Aquifer Watershed Protection Project?
It was expanded. So all of the city, it's for water protection, so you can also say that purchasing property is for water protection, getting rid of structures is water protection, cleaning out the storm inlets on Brody is water protection, cleaning up creek bed,
Yeah,
et
so,
cetera.
but I guess my question is, because I looked at it's like section 334, which defines the nature
Yep.
of a venue tax, and it has, and it has several categories, there they are.
Yep.
So it's section F is watershed protection, which matches the language in the venue tax, the green tax fund that the public voted on. That's not a park, though. So a park is a separate thing. A municipal park is actually an entirely different category. So am I correct that the Sunset Valley green tax funds cannot be used to purchase land to turn into a park?
Cannot
That
be used
appears
to
to
turn
be
a
the
park?
reading of it.
That's-
So I think that it gets into the nuance of saying the city has an interest in purchasing land for watershed protection. The land itself all the land may not be required for watershed protection, but the only purchasable land is the entire lot. And this is what happened with the Country White property. We had to purchase the entire land because it wasn't subdivided at the time.
Sure.
Right.
We were purchasing it for watershed protection under the green tax or the venue tax. And there was a decision made to essentially parcel it out to say, let's take a portion of the land that is not required for watershed protection, subdivide it and make that available as a lot, for future single family. That's how it gets.
Okay.
So the intention was that we had to purchase the entire land in order for watershed protection. We are going to protect the watershed that's part of that land, but and so there's some discussion around in the past, and I'll say that, because this is what happened last time 37 Low Note came up, was there is a portion of that property which falls under similar conditions in terms of land that it's not part of the critical water quality zone, right? So in the past, the reason I believe that it was pulled from the previous zoning effort was because there was this idea, well, maybe we can subdivide it and use part of the land.
So just so I understand that is, lastly, and I'll sit down, okay, so I understand you can only buy the parcel as it is being sold, not a fraction of it. So 37 Lone Oak was purchased ultimately with green tax dollars.
Correct.
It cannot be turned into a park as is. If you wanted to turn a portion of it into a park or something else, it would need to be somehow, the green tax dollars would need to go back in, right? So if you wanted to turn 30% of it into a park, the general fund would have to essentially buy that portion back from the green tax fund, correct?
Because the way we did it before, generally, now that being said, I think we'd have to understand specifics, but what we did in the Country White property is that money went back into the venue tax because essentially we bought the whole property with the venue tax and then we paid back the venue tax with the sale of the portion of it.
Yeah, so there's a cost associated with doing anything else with that, with any portion of the properties that were venue tax purchased.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, we can change it to something else. We have to move money around. Okay, I just wanted to understand.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.
I promised to read a couple things. Can I read something?
Yeah, is it from another resident?
This has to do with, so what we're talking about is what happened after the fact. So originally, the property was purchased. What was promised to the residents when that property was purchased? I happen to have a record of the entire comments from the ad hoc committee that was formed that met 2 times a month for 2 years to discuss the Lone Oak property. One of the committee members writes, "When this property was originally purchased by the city, I was told by the mayor and several other officials that it would be used for green space and/or flood control. There was never any mention selling it as home sites, and we would never have been in favor of the purchase if we thought that this was anticipated. This property was not acquired through condemnation of right of eminent domain. It was an arm's length transaction between a willing seller and a willing buyer for market value. The seller made profit, which was his right. If the city had wanted this land developed, he would have been much cheaper to let the seller, who was a developer, do it himself. One of the principal benefits of living in Sunset Valley is a large amount of green space. This gentleman was aware of the original intention of the property. He was on the original ad hoc committee that discussed this property for 2 years, twice a month. We should honor what the original work was that was done for this property. We shouldn't be talking about throwing away work that a lot of previous residents worked very long and hard on. I just would hope also that we would honor our land development code, which explicitly states we are not to develop in water quality transition zones without a variance. So if someone has a piece of land that has a section that is water quality transition zone, we're not allowed to build on it. There's a tiny sliver that sits very proud of the property in the front. It's a tiny sliver, it's in uplands. You're not gonna develop it, it doesn't even meet setback requirements. You're not gonna shave off a little piece and someday sell it. Just honor the original intention. Honor what the residents were promised when they used the funds from the general fund originally to purchase the property. When it was refinanced to fund City Hall, that's a different, separate issue. What was the original intention? It's clear, it's a lot of documentation on it.
Thank you.
All the residents were also surveyed at that time.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think this is the first time I've been back here in about 3 years, so good to see everyone. Just a couple of thoughts. I guess I'm going to limit my comments more to the issue of tabling or not tabling right now, because it seems like we could get really into the weeds of what to do with the properties. The first thing is that with regard to 37 Lone Oak, I'm going to focus more on that because I don't know about the circumstances of purchasing the other properties. I don't want to speak, if I can't speak intelligently about those two properties. For 37 Lone Oak, as we've heard today and what we've seen is there's been a lot of discussion about that over the years since, if you go back to 2010 when there were initial votes on it, I remember at the time, this is I think what Lisa was referring to, that one of the things that the council rejected at the time was that the proposed sublot, which is if you take the northernmost acre of that and subdivide it, that wouldn't meet city criteria for a residential lot at the time. And I think the text was, it would be difficult to defend it if other property owners made similar requests. Why do I know this? It's because I remember writing a letter about this in 2010, because I had just moved here at the time and there was a discussion about what to do with that property. Came up again in 2016 when I think there were some discussions about it at the time, partly before I was on council. When I was on council, this was, I think, Mayor was on council, Councilmember Rosengarten was as well. In my mind, our decision at the time to use green tax money to buy the Lone Oak property wasn't a shell game. It wasn't a way to say, hey, let's use this, pull this money from here for now, because we don't want to borrow money and this is our way of doing it. We were making a commitment to buy that property for that purpose, for green tax purposes. And at that point, the fact that the zoning didn't match up with what the purpose that we were buying it for, the deal that we made was this is why we were buying that property was for green tax purposes. Otherwise, we shouldn't have used green tax money to do it. That's my understanding. That was my understanding at the time when we made the vote that we did unanimously, and we made the choices that we did at the time. And and this is to encumber it with the green tax protections is the choice that we made at the time. And I appreciate the council making the choice to say, hey, let's bring this up, let's get the ball rolling on this discussion. I understand waiting for, now there's this comprehensive master plan and saying, okay, let's see what they have to say. I think it's also a dangerous game sometimes to say, well, let's wait for residents to weigh in. We've heard residents weigh in today. We've heard residents weigh in over the last 10 years over this issue each time it's come up. And it's what happens a lot of times in our city is we go out, get a survey done, a handful of residents respond to that survey, and then we say, well, let's wait for more residents. It's almost like saying, well, we need other residents to respond to this before we can say that the public has really spoken on this. And I think each time we bring it up, you're going to get a different set of people because, you know, the city changes, we have turnover in our city. And, you know, obviously you listen to the people who comment, but we shouldn't discount the people who comment every single time on this. So people see it on the agenda and they see this is something we need to talk about, so they come out and talk. And to say that, well, we don't want to listen to these residents, we want to listen to other residents who come to another forum, it discounts the people who show up and who speak. And, you know, and to that degree, to the next agenda item that's on there about the open town hall, I hope we don't shut off that system as a way of commenting, because it is a way for people to get to hear the thoughts of other people in the city without it all being in private emails that, you know, we all used to get on council and the ones that say, please don't share this with other members. And, you know, I was like, well, it's open, it should be open to the public. And, you know, on that note, and it's kind of switching topics here, let's please keep, if we're going to keep the support page, let's not limit it to 5 comments that you can support. If we're allowed to support other residents' comments, I don't see why there should be a cap on that. But anyway, back to this, back to the conservation place. You know, if you all need to table it. But it sounds like there's a way to have this discussion and get the ball rolling. And by voting on this today, it's not putting the mayor on the clock and saying he needs to do something within a certain time. And it says the zoning commission has a deadline, but not on when that what the timeline between the motion being voted on today and the application actually going forward. And even on that note, I think it might be worth, you know, obviously I don't know the land development code as well as the city attorney does. There's a section in there, 150.011B, that says none of the timetables and deadlines apply to the city when the city is an applicant. So I'm not even sure whether that 45-day deadline applies to the city or not, but that's just something else to consider as we're moving forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? And Barbara, I did want to ask for clarification on a couple of things. One being, if there is a timeline, does it start with any council motion or action that they take tonight, or would it start with the application being submitted? And then I guess the second question, just coming up from the resident, asking, is there a timeline that an exception in the code for the city itself?
It starts from the time that you file an application.
Okay.
So if
I held back on filing the application for a period of time, the 45 days wouldn't start until then?
It wouldn't.
Okay.
I mean, you know, it takes an application to get it started.
Okay.
The gentleman who just spoke is accurate. There is a provision in 150.011 that does indicate that some question about the applicability of the land development code to the city. That it does, in C it mentioned, in B it does say none of the timetables and deadlines established herein apply to the city when the city is applicant under this land development code. So I guess you could have your own timetable, but everybody is everybody else out there is under a 45-day window, so.
Okay. So Council, just my thoughts. I think the clearest one that we have a path forward on, if we're going to take anything action tonight, would be 37 Lone Oak. It's one of these that, you know, it's been discussed many times before, but that being said, you know, we might want to wait until everything is sort of the rest of the input process. I can't see us going against what has been previously given as input and as an ideas for that specific space. I can see other options being considered for other ones, but I personally, that's the one that has a clear sort of path forward in terms of it shouldn't remain single family. You know, I don't think it should be parkland. I think it should be, you know, a conservation green space, one of those two designations. But that being said, that's an input that we may want to get additional input from the public on this master plan. It's just, we've had a lot of input and discussion on that particular, tract over the last 12 years now, beginning with its purchase and the idea of it remaining single family. It won't, right? It's just a question of, how it moves forward. That being said, this may be something that we want to say we want to take action on by bringing it back after being tabled, or, just waiting for these next steps in the process. Councilmember Rosengren.
Sylvia wanted to speak, and then if you don't mind if I speak.
Go ahead, Sylvia.
So the city is exempt on this, the city has exemptions for itself throughout the entire code. We never take those exemptions. We try to set the example, right? Whether it's impervious cover, whether it's a variance to ourselves, even a variance for these facilities, we had to come and grant ourselves a variance to do that. So I wouldn't encourage us, number one, to do any of that. I wouldn't encourage us to do something we're not expecting of everybody else to do. It just sets a bad example. Number two, the comprehensive plan, as Barbara stated, drives the zoning. So as you're going through the comprehensive plan, if there are uses in there that are going to be added to zoning, just understand that whatever action you take and zoning commission then takes, if there are uses that are changed or amended or allowed, you're going to be stuck with some of those uses as well. The other thing to consider is longer term implications to parks. If we zone things parks, right? There are going to be amenities that are desired, wanted. What are we going to do in terms of capital projects, maintenance, and all of those things? So they're all inherently tied, just things for you to consider.
Councilmember Rosengren.
As Kedden was talking about 2010, 2016, 37 Lone Oak was discussed, even more current, it was presented to zoning, and zoning recommended denying the zoning change. And then it came to council and we denied the zoning change. And this was 2016 when it was denied, because there was like 5 other properties along with it, and then 37 was pulled out and denied. Okay, that I didn't know.
Councilmember Litchfield.
Yeah, so to my mind, I appreciate debate because we can change our minds. So to my mind, I think it's more important that we do move on this and just kick the ball, just start it rolling. We have very intentionally put encumbrances on ourselves on these properties by purchasing them with the funds we did. And so for us to now take the next step and affirmatively act, it just apply. We're preparing an application to the zoning commission, which will then generate public hearing, more public feedback. Let's start. I don't see any reason to delay starting. And to that end, I would support them all as parks, even though hopefully we want to ratchet them down a little bit in our usage. It's us making that decision, but we're taking away the very egregious option. We're taking steps and saying look, we are going to follow the intention. We're walking this path. We may walk further. Hopefully we do, but we are going to take a step and walk down that path tonight.
Councilmember Rosengren.
6107 Brody Lane was never in the comprehensive plan. So I would vote that we wait and get all 3 of them visited with the consultant that we've already hired, and that we get that process done first. Thank you.
Councilmember Reeds.
Yeah, I still, I've listened to the arguments, and they're good arguments, and I understand it's been a long time that it's been discussed and such. The only issue I will say one issue that I have here tonight is that the people that are here that are vocal about this are the people that are kind of right next to the property, which is kind of important, totally important, but our other residents also have a say also, and so I don't want to circumvent that, and I don't think that, to me, there is absolutely no rush to circumvent the consultant process. There's no reason to. I don't know of any reason, unless somebody can tell me something compelling that we have to get it done now. There's not, and so I would say let's do the process that we started out to do. Thanks.
Councilmember Johnson.
I think that guy over there would probably have a lot to say about this as well, and Alfonso, who's not here. And so I'm kind of, well, he has a lot to say about everything, but, but so I would also like to have like his input on it. You know, shoehorn, like just saying like, we'll just make them park because then we can kind of like have a little bit of, I mean, I don't think they're all gonna end up as just, like when I'm saying park, I mean like park, you know, like in the zoning. Like one is gonna be park, one is gonna be conservation, one is gonna be green space. I think that's what I wrote down. It just seems like that's like what makes sense, but it's just like to get like the right sizing of them based on comprehensive plan, which is coming up. You know, Alfonso not being here, I don't think we need to wait for the. I don't know why I cannot remember the name, what we called that ad hoc committee. Parks and Open Space Ad hoc Committee. I don't think we need to wait for that, but there's like some other things that are like right there. So I'm hoping it's not going to be 10 years, but like I'm hoping more like, you know, 8 weeks before we can make some progress on this.
Any further discussion? Okay, so the motion that we currently have is to table this item to bring it back as part of the Parks and Open Space planning, our committee's planning process, right? And so that's going to take input in terms of the comprehensive plan and the development of that. With that, we'll go to votes. All those in favor, oh, go ahead.
Point of order, I think tabling it means it has to come back next week.
No.
But there's a different thing we could do that
I made
pushes it
a
out
statement after
indefinitely.
tabling it. I said after the comprehensive plan, after we have
So
town
there's
hall
a
meetings.
tabling with conditions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councilmember?
You can table indefinitely, or
So
you can.
just to clarify, you did say, I believe that you said the parks and open space. I know I mentioned the comp plan once discussion started, but the original motion was to bring back these items for consideration after, well, you kept saying process. And so my interpretation of that was once the parks and open space ad hoc committee has completed their work, right? And you all have looked at the plan. Is that what you meant?
I can repeat.
Okay.
I move that this agenda item number 7 be tabled. This agenda item is putting the cart before the horse. We set $50,000 aside for a consulting firm to work on an open space master plan and have yet to get that done, open space master plan, before we change zoning on the open spaces in question. We want to have a citywide survey. We want to have town hall meetings with all residents. We have a Parks and Open Space Ad hoc Committee to then review the suggestions and make recommendations to council with the properties as they are zoned. There are 4 actions that have to be taken.
So it's not, just to clear, it's not a master plan. It's the Parks and Open Space Plan.
Parks and
Yeah.
Open Space,
So,
okay.
but yeah, so, yeah, will you send that motion to me? That's very, very
I'm sorry.
lengthy.
Okay?
Yeah,
That's a lot
Okay.
of conditions.
yeah. But it's basically to table it, or the motion is to table it after all of those things have occurred.
Until those, yes.
Yeah, can you please send that and then have the city secretary maybe bring that up just so we can make sure everybody understands what the motion is for?
Can a friendly amendment come from someone that's not the second?
Make a suggestion, yeah.
Well, I pull that open. They're the consultants based on like what we have. They're not really telling us like where to go. I think the master plan is more kind of like what's dictating like what they are going to be, and then they can kind of be like, these are the amenities that you need. So I don't know. That and it also just seems like that's pretty far, and it's just like we need to move on this. I think.
will.
I think I'm sorry. I didn't realize
August.
you were trying to like get my attention. I thought.
Has to do with the open space plan. So currently, these properties are zoned single-family. I do not want to have an Uplands quagmire where we're told we're not considering all options because of what they're zoned. I want to make it clear. So are we going to be considering in the Parks and Open Space Master Plan a parks and open space use of these properties? Because if we're talking about using all potential uses on the planet, that opens it up to other zoning categories, and I need to know that answer before we bunch that.
So is
What
it?
do you mean?
No, that's up, you don't need to know the answer. That is part of, the consultant is going to provide recommendations. The community is going to have input on those recommendations. The community will then ask the council to vote on those recommendations.
Yeah.
It will be the council's decision whether or not to support a zoning of XYZ, whether or not to support parks of XYZ. Our direction to the consultants is, you consider this as if there's no restrictions. You consider this as if what is the best and highest use for that property, for the community, given the input that you've already had from P&E and given the commitment that you've had from the ad hoc committee. We're acting as if we have, the world at our feet, and we can do with it what the community thinks is in the best value. There's a process, they're gonna give recommendations, and then we have to move to zone, not zone, protect, not protect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Hence the
we're
term
not
master
driving that
plan.
committee.
Yeah,
But so they're looking at city-owned property,
yes, city-owned
not
property.
city-owned property that is zoned in this narrow band. So like they can look at these 3 properties, which are single-family. and just-
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. We said city-owned property. We didn't say only property that is
Okay.
owned a particular
That's what I thought.
space.
Yeah.
Carolyn, you look like you were about to say something. Okay. I mean, that's.
Chair of that committee, I have something to say.
Please go
I think
ahead.
that's,
I already said that we would like clarity from council. Council's vision helps inform committee work, very important. Secondly, I think that this brings to light a deeper issue in our code, which Sylvia constantly nags at our code, and it's for good reason. We have protocols in place if we annex land. What do? We first zone it single family. We take immediate action thereafter within a certain timeline, how to rezone it. We need immediate action plans when we purchase green tax land. That needs to be a part of the next round of land development code. It's a sore spot, it's a gaping hole in our land development code. Right now it says in the definitions, in our land development code, both conservation space and green space is considered permanently protected. Do we need to further codify that? I've heard a lot of talk of, oh, well, it's only protected by a vote. Well, why is our land development code saying it's permanent then? There's several problems here that this is being brought to light. We need to take action. We need to provide vision to the committees. We need council leadership. We need mayoral leadership here. And we need to close the loopholes in our process. And we need to button it up and be done with it. If we don't believe in water quality protection and we want to do parks instead, then we need to change the tax. If we want to open it up, we need to look at the original reasons why it's there in the first place and re-examine that. For now, we've been dealt these cards and we have to deal with it based on the code that we have in place. That's all we have.
So the current code is an absolute quagmire, Lisa. Absolutely, there's no doubt. Some cities, when they annex, which by the way has pretty much gone away. But right now, let me just give you a scenario of what may happen. If this council were in agreement and all decided we're going to protect and we're going to zone it parkland, in our current ordinance, conservation and green space is allowed within a park. But the zoning category is so broad, it is the potential that there's a park that now ends up right behind your house. And then we've got to talk about the zoning for a park, which could potentially say, well, we need parking, well, we need amenities, well, we need X, Y, Z. And to Helen's point, there are some areas that we don't want to be parks. We don't want to have those amenities. So that's what the comp plan, the work that you guys did on that comp plan is informing. What do you want to separate out? What is actual that we want to do, which then informs the zoning. The zoning then drives the uses that are allowed, and it becomes this wonderful circle. But right now, if they took action and said, park because we want to protect and don't ever want to sell it, good luck, Lisa. You'll probably end up with a jungle gym behind your house in about 5 years. I didn't write it. It's a horrible circular reference throughout the entire code. And that's going through its own rewrite right now. We've got an RFP going through its own rewrite. So without us causing some serious hazard to ourselves a few years down the road, because one council can't encumber another council. You just can't do it. Voters change, the body changes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do we have to look at our land development code and clean it up? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Councilor Litchfield?
Excuse me, I don't have a computer in front of me and it's fun. What is the name of this ad hoc committee? It's like the Open Spaces, Parks and Open Space Planning Ad Hoc Committee.
Yep.
So I'd like to offer a substitute motion that we table this until the resolution of the Parks and Open Spaces Ad Hoc Committee.
How's that different?
Hers was, there were way more encumbrances in that. Like that sounded like a lot of hurdles. And this, to me, this is like one thing that I think gets to the intent. It recognizes the intent that everybody has. But it's just saying that we are going to wait for the, and I'd also like to, and we're going to communicate to that committee and the consultants that we're willing to take action on this. We just want guidance.
Can we review all the steps?
Point, but without that golden sentence, like we're sort of flies on the wall listening for what you guys want us to do.
So does the motion maker wish to make any changes to their motion?
I didn't understand the motion, or the amendment, I should say.
So the substitute motion that I offered was to table this until the resolution of the the Parks and Open Spaces Ad Hoc Committee, while communicating to them that we are willing to take action on these properties. We just want guidance from them to that effect.
That sounds a lot like.
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is, frankly.
The motion already states that.
Well,
wanna
do we
restate
have
the
the
motion?
motion? Did Rudy send you the motion?
Yeah,
Okay,
can you
let's
just
say it was
restate
the
it?
long part,
Is that the issue?
I did like the use of the substitute, which like we just learned a couple months ago. Yeah.
Helen, go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, instead of making it the ad hoc committee's responsibility to make these kinds of decisions or advise, we're not experts. The consultants are the experts.
Yes.
We're going to be helping them understand who we are. So it'd be the consultant, based upon all the input from all the residents who are willing to make that input, to come up with this plan, and then the council will either say yay or nay. And I think that's when all those issues will come up and we can clean it up.
Sure, and to my mind, like that committee the resolution of that committee means that we get that report back from the consultants and act on it as council. Like that's what that captures for me, is that we're saying the same thing. I just want to like point at one point on a timeline, not 7. And like, let's just define that one point on a timeline where there's one action that encapsulates all of these things, which we all want. We want public feedback. We want the consultants. We want the experts. We want all of this stuff. But I just want to point at one spot in time, which is the resolution of that committee.
I don't know if the committee is the answer. It's, I think what you said is the resolution, it's the plan. The
Comprehensive plan?
It's different from
The
conference.
Parks and Open Space Plan that we paying consultants to help us
Sure.
formulate.
The plan then. So pending that plan.
Yes.
Great.
So, so the council adoption of that plan, or when it's presented, when the plan is presented, because they could present you a plan, and you guys,
That directs us to kind of pick this back up. And then whether or not, and so then I think presentation of that plan is the right point, because we may like nix the plan and be like, that sucks. They want to put in, 15 pools, I don't know. But like, I don't want to tie myself to that, but I want that presentation from them.
Are you okay with that?
I'm sorry. I was busy sending my
Yeah. So,
motion to Matt.
do you want me to let me teams?
Number
Mr.
5,
Sylvia.
go down.
Number 5, I see it.
Guys, there's a really important thing that Carolyn and I need to tell you. The survey that we're doing for $50,000 is for recreational activities. They're not zoning experts. They're not gonna go through our city code, our land development. They're not gonna be like, we're paying them $50,000 to look at all the land and to survey the residents. If the sky's the limit and we don't have council direction, we don't have proper zoning, we're gonna get the same problem that we have with the uplands, which is everything under the sun is gonna come back. We're not gonna be able to parse through the data with the surveys. We're not even gonna know what to ask on the surveys because we don't know what future land use map really truly looks like according to council direction. This is a really important point. They're gonna want to say anything. They're gonna say, we wanna put a pool here, and we wanna put pickle courts here, and we're gonna get the same thing that we had happen with the uplands, which is everything under the sun. We need to have guidelines. So I just wanna stress, this is very important to set the wheels in motion so that we know what the future, the next 5 years looks like for planning, for public works, for the ad hoc committee, and for everyone going forward who needs to work on this. It's super important.
Councilmember Johnson.
That's why I feel like what's coming to us in June?
Comprehensive plan.
The comprehensive plan should
And,
be like
and
more
future,
like
and future land use. map.
like should be a little bit more of our guiding
Matt,
star
you
on
can
this.
take off the word indefinitely. I didn't say indefinitely. I typed it, but I didn't say it.
Again, like, first of all, like August
Oh,
and whatever else we do with that, you know, that could like drag on forever, but
I'm sorry.
it's all good. Want to say it?
I already retyped over that and changed it from, have you had to, and why I didn't send the new info, I don't know. We changed zoning, let me see where it is. As put in, we said, park and open space plan. So consulting firm to work on park and open space, for consulting firm to work on park and open space / comprehensive plan is what I have.
But the consultant's not working on that.
It's not a comprehensive plan, okay?
So
we'll take that off.
So, Rudy, why don't we do presentation of the open space, parks and open space plan?
Okay.
And that's, by then, that will encompass the surveys, all the town
Take off
hall
master plan.
meetings, all the resident input. So it's the presentation of the parks and open space plan. And I recognize that they may get tons of ideas, but we would have the same struggle as a council, but these are the professionals, and we are hopeful that these professionals will guide with the help of the ad hoc committee, and if they don't,
Parks and open space master
well, I'm gonna want
plan.
my $50,000 back. So, yeah. Are you okay with that? To just do it simply, the presentation?
That needs to be
I think if the members of that committee are telling you that it's not going to come, like they're not going to give you any good input, then I don't know. I mean, they're on the committee. Like, they're telling you that it's not going to give us any information.
We know the location of these properties, and we know that there's not gonna be a sky rise there. We know
Well, no.
that they're next to residential. We know that it's gonna have to be something that residential is gonna approve. We know that it's gonna be limited in spectrum. We know that.
What you're saying here is wait for that committee to weigh in on it. The
Yes.
committee is telling us that's not what's going to come out of it.
I understand.
But what can guide us on this is a comprehensive plan, which
Well, what did we
Well,
just
but-
pay for? What are we paying for? No, we are paying for a plan, a master plan for our open spaces, correct?
It's not, we took the word master plan out. It's a plan, and it had to do with, there's a recreational needs assessment, there's assessment of the properties, but it's the comprehensive plan that is the defining that helps set the stage for zoning. And so it's really, that is the process where you're talking about the use of the properties and stuff. So, and the comprehensive plan, it's literally in that process too, and that's in the public process as well. So it's not necessarily, I don't know if you need to work on the Parks and Open Space Committee to do that. It's really the comprehensive plan that should be detailing your zoning and the plans for the city.
it's a dynamic
So-
situation, but it sounds like, I'm with you. That's what I thought we were getting. But if they're telling us that's not what we're getting, then that's not what we're
Well,
getting.
then I think we need to
Say comprehensive
facilitate
plan.
this process where we are getting what we want. I think we can do that, and I think this is a professional firm. I think they can look at the properties and give us overviews. They don't have to, you know, I think we need to get what we want. And that is the plan, a full plan.
Well, we have two parallel processes that we're undertaking right now. One is the company that we're engaged with, the firm we're engaging with, to come up with basically uses, potential uses for the open spaces in the city,
Yeah.
focused on recreational needs, whether that's light recreation needs or more impactful. We also have a parallel process of the comprehensive master plan being done separately, right? It's not through this committee, it's not through this firm. There is some overlap because that comprehensive plan, you know, the input of that process could change how our future land use looks, right? So we have a plan that was created 12 years ago and a comprehensive master plan. This is an update to that, right? So it's revisiting that and saying, let's look at our comprehensive plan. Now that we know we have a new city property, let's include that in our future land use map, right? Is that part of what would come out of this comprehensive plan?
So your comprehensive plan is going to drive land uses. Land uses are inherent in zoning. Zoning is tied into the land development code.
But would this comprehensive plan review also generate a future land use?
Yes, but that future land use map is married to the zoning code.
Well, what I'm
because of
saying
the
is now that,
uses.
like, for example, 6107 wasn't part of our last future land use. It should be part of our next future land use map.
Yes, it should be. However, the use is allowed in that future land use map, because let me bring that map up so that you know what I'm talking about when I say that. You can't divorce any of these things. We are unwilling cohabitators, if that's even a word. So this is the future land use map.
But can't see it on your screen, sorry.
Is this one from 2010?
2011, which is the
2011?
most recent. This is the most recent plan. So this map is driven by your comprehensive plan. That's the first overarching umbrella. The second umbrella is the land uses that make up this map that are tied to the zoning code. You can't touch the zoning code without touching the land development code. And so there's three processes going on right now. You have the comprehensive plan overreaching. We have the land development code that's over here off to the side that may need an amendment before we even engage the consultant, it sounds like. And then you have this parks plan, because as it is right now, you have things in green labeled all the same, and they should be different shades of green because those are different uses. You have different things allowed within that shade of green, right? Yes. But it's not
That's
green.
not correct, yeah.
So you have an umbrella.
But that's the future land use.
Yes, you have this overarching, right? And then you have uses under that come out of that are driven by land development. And I say driven by land development because specifically in each of these zoning categories, there are authorized uses. So you can't separate one from the other. I understand that the Parks and Master Plan is, Lisa wants to call it a survey, it's a recreational, la 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 la. What has to happen is the first document of the comp plan, which is already under review. It's already going through the very public process. We've advertised it, correct? Yes. When is our next public hearing? Okay, so we have a hearing coming up in May. That comp plan is our constitution. We can't do anything outside of that. So that's on the fast track. Everybody's done a great job. The next thing that goes with that is if we agree that those things in the comp plan match, then we need to go to zoning and say, okay, in our comp plan, we said we want to protect conservation areas and we want to give them XYZ level of protection. We need to go into the land development code and perhaps create a different district that gives XYZ levels of protection. So do you understand? They're all married. One doesn't drive the other. They're all driven by the comp plan, all of them.
When will we have an updated future land use plan?
You can't have that until the comp plan is adopted and you've agreed to all the land uses and amendments within the land development code.
And then that would be done by what committee or group? Or how was it done in the past? Like how was the future land use developed in the past?
It was done with the comprehensive plan. It was done as part of that process.
So when the comprehensive plan was adopted, the future land use map was adopted at the same
I
time?
think it was adopted as part of that, yeah.
Okay.
So if the track for council is we need to finish it sooner rather than later before the land development code is reviewed, what we will bring to you is the comprehensive plan as it should be recommended, and you guys get to agree, disagree, dissect. The community has their input. We make those specific changes in the land development code and say conservation district should have this, parks should have this, whatever changes come out of that. And we update this map to more accurately reflect those land uses and those intensities. Because the whole purpose of this future land use map is not only to guide orderly development in the statute, it is so that we ensure our infrastructure pieces are there. And infrastructure isn't just water and wastewater. Infrastructure is also park amenities, roads, and those things that make these very public parcels so that the public can have gainful use and enjoyment, or a specific protection that protects the entire public at large.
So I think where I'm struggling is that we have these 2 or 3 different parallel processes, depending on now, if you're talking about changes in the land development code itself, that inform each other, right? So how we use our city-owned property could inform our comprehensive master plan, or at least it could inform our future land use development, right? Because those things are geared to public input and getting, process. The comprehensive plan doesn't specifically designate certain areas of the city for certain zoning, right? It doesn't say that part of the comprehensive, it just creates designated boundaries or, could update the zoning, for protection purposes, or et cetera. But it's not saying 37 Lone Oak needs to be green space or it needs to be park. Right. It says that in the future land use map. Right. Pardon me, ma'am. I'm sorry. Yep. Let's. If you're speaking, you'll have to speak into the mic and you'll have to be recognized. It's okay. However, part of the council's purview is to say, we need to protect this land. We need to do something with it, and we could either do that in conjunction with the conservation master plan. We could do it in conjunction with the ad hoc committee making recommendations. We could do that on our own. We could do a zoning change to say, based on the current land development code, we feel these protections are enough and we want to move forward with that. So there's nothing to restrict us from doing that at any time. It's just a question of when have we received enough public input to take action, right? And say that. If we are waiting for the comprehensive master plan before we decide what are the potential uses, right, which is probably prudent because we may be changing the definition of green space, parks, those areas. Maybe we want to wait until we get that before we make decisions. Right. If we want to wait until we get public input into the best uses for those lands, then that's really tied to the survey and those groups. We don't have to, but it may be prudent to wait for one or both of those conditions to say, how do we want to proceed with these specific parcels, right?
Yeah.
Because it may not be appropriate, under the comprehensive plan that parks or green space or conservation for, as it's defined now, is what we want to designate 37 Lone Oak. But, certainly there are steps along the way, and I get that we don't want to wait too long because these are things that we've been waiting 12 years on in some cases, right? So I just want to make sure that we have a clear definition of when we're going to be revisiting this. It's not, and it's understanding that there are, moving parts here that we want to get, input on if we want to wait for that.
You're absolutely right. When we have zoning changes, we should be having sections in our zoning report and subsequent ordinance action that this zoning change is also affecting the future land use map and making any necessary amendments to both the existing and the future map. We're missing that part in our process, and so when somebody says spot zoning, which gives Barbara and I shudder,
I didn't understand it. So.
I shouldn't even want to look my way when I say that. That's in essence what we're doing because we haven't kept ourselves abreast of the changes within the community.
And I also think it just as a best practice, we do, the resident comment that when we purchase land, we should quickly follow up with a zoning change because that's how we get in this mess. We don't take action and it just becomes clouded by, the fact, our plans. Yeah, exactly. Councilmember Johnson?
I think also if we're leaning towards tabling it, we don't have to like, chuck it way down the, I mean, we can kick it to like the next step. And then it's like, if we get there and we're still just like, we need more input, then we can always table it again. But I mean, I think the next checkpoint is the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
We will see that in June is the timeframe that we expect that?
So here's the schedule, just as a reminder. There's a town hall this Monday. Oh gosh, where did this go? There's a town hall Monday, and then the actual official public hearing that will be, noticed in the paper. That's going to be the second council meeting in May 17th. The zoning commission will have a hearing May 25th. And then, they'll have their input. I believe the P&E committee is set to have their final look at it at the beginning of June. And then we have it for the second meeting, possible adoption, the second meeting in June, which is June 21st. So lots of public input between
Councilor Litchfield?
now and then.
Well, Mayor, you just mentioned something about right when we purchase a property, we should act on it. So then why don't we just make 6401 start on that toward a park right now, and we can avoid the kind of other longer term issues. Like we can let those come back, but why don't we at least push one of them down the road a little bit? Like we can make a little bit of progress.
And let's go, there's more people ready to speak, so let's keep opening. Helen, go ahead for your public comments.
Well, in terms of making that Brody property a park, based upon everything that's been said, I don't think you can rely upon the residents to agree with you. So I think you ought to just go ahead and table it. I would suggest that. But the other thing I was going to just suggest is that when that came up about the consultants are only doing recreational land, and that does put a real clinker in having them be our input in terms of what's happening right here. Is bird watching a recreational activity? Does that fit under a?
I sure called it so in my tourism days back south.
Yeah, and High Island and all those.
I think walking on a trail is a recreational activity.
So if you use that broad definition, then they could be looking at all of our spaces, but they would need to know that we have a lot of constraints on those spaces already. But I think that they would still have valuable input on the things that we could do with those spaces that might enhance whatever bird watching or walking or nature, I don't know, trailability, something. That's all. Thank you.
John?
I'll keep it quick. So specifically for 37 Lone Oak, I think it's strange that the code isn't reflective of the current legal obligations as they exist on the basis of the land being financed by the green tax. So I don't really understand why that shouldn't be acted upon immediately, because it's an oversight on the part of the city government to not bring its code into the zoning into compliance with the actual things that it's doing. So you buy the tract to protect as watershed protection with green tax dollars. That's all it can be used for. It should be zoned now as conservation for watershed protection, because that's all it can be used for. Now, if 8 months from now you want to sell it and replenish the green tax and do something else with it, that's great. But the legal fact right now is that that plot and the others purchased with green tax dollars are conservation land. They're not a park, they're not single family, so that's just incorrect. Like, I don't, why table the updating of the zoning with current legal reality when there's clearly like a comprehensive, we got to plan the entirety of the city thing that may or may not happen at some point in the distant future. We're not really sure what these consultants are doing. $50,000 is not a lot of money to plan a city. I'm sure the scope of work's pretty limited. It seems like there's a little confusion about what the scope of work an RFP actually says. But if you look at the map, I mean, I live right adjacent to that property. it can't be used for any of these other things. And it can't be used for anything. Like, that's what it is. If you want to sell it off and use it as single family, okay, sell it off. But you can't do that without, there's only like one path for this stuff. So why, I think it's creating, the reason I'm here talking about this is because I think the impression that I'm left with is let's keep optionality, but you don't have optionality because you purchased it in a particular way. So so fake optionality sounds like it creates a lot of discomfort for those of us that are directly impacted. And then those of us that care about sort of rule of law, and when you buy things in a statutory way according to the local government development codes, you should actually do it. So I don't think this is ambiguous in the cases of the green tax dollars purchases. I think it's cut and dry. There's current reality. The zoning should reflect the current reality. If democratically you want to change it, great. Rezone it then. 8 months from now, 12 months from now, whenever that happens. It's not going to be 3 months from now. We know that. It's not going to be 3 months. It's not going to be 6 months. It's not going to be at the end of this summer. So that's my final plea. These properties have current conservation 33-4-F designations by virtue of being purchased by a venue tax whose purpose was solely for watershed protection and conservation, not municipal parks. And they should just be zoned to reflect that until a change is made. But that's the present reality. The law should reflect reality. Thanks.
Thank you. So council, further discussion on this? Are we going to change the motion, or is it going to stay as?
Move on.
I have a, if you don't
One
mind.
more, yes, please do.
I have a
Then
suggestion.
we're going to close public comments after this last statement.
I have a suggestion that might help clear up the motion a little bit and could address some of the concerns that have been raised and, about what's going to happen to the property in the meantime. Because I think the more we leave the door open for what he referred to as like the fake optionality, I think there's always the concern of, well, what are you all planning to do with it? And like someone else mentioned, when people see other things on the agenda, like, oh, what's the sale of real property? Does it have to do with these properties or not? So I think if you add to the motion, one, if it has a very clear time certain, that it seems like it does now, and then if you add on there and say, and this council will take no action that would be inconsistent with any of these properties' use that it was purchased under the green tax or something of that nature, you can't bind future councils, but you can bind yourself that until this happens, you're not going to do anything that would be inconsistent with its use that it was purchased for under the green tax. I think that could relieve some of the concerns that people may have.
Thank you. So that's a suggestion to
That's a
amend the
great
motion.
idea.
Yeah.
That no action be taken by council while this process is continuing, or in process, whatever.
I would say no action inconsistent with its use as a green tax purchase property.
Okay.
Would the motion maker and the second like to work whether language can be brought in?
No action.
No action while this process is.
The LDC part is really, like, that's the hairy part. Like, I would take that out.
This is what I thought I heard. This is actually what Rudy typed. So I'm trying to figure out where the marriage is between all of that in the discussion.
But that's already been changed,
But
even
the
on my copy. But be tabled until presentation or the presentation of the comprehensive plan, the land development code, and the parks and open space plan, with no action being taken by council until this is fulfilled.
The LDC changes are gonna take forever. That one, like, I would, if we could pull that out,
Yeah,
that's
take that
fine
out.
to me.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole
No
different.
presentation of the
Because
comprehensive
now
plan,
we're
the
talking
parks and
about
open space
6
plan,
months.
Right.
You
with
know,
And
council
this is like
doing no
summer.
action
Yeah,
during
that's
this
the summer.
process.
So,
Taking no action regarding the property itself. Yeah, not that we're not gonna make any decisions on
We can just go on
comprehensive plan or
vacation.
anything. We do nothing. Party, no. Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Agree.
Can you step up to the mic, please?
We already can't take a
The
action
way,
counter to
the way it's worded right now means you couldn't even have any other discussion about it. I think you could say, if you're not taking any action that's inconsistent with their usage as, under the green tax, then at least you can talk about it, but it kind of preserves the status quo right now. So that would be my only suggestion. With their,
Green tag status,
yeah.
venue, there you go, that's better. Okay,
Motion maker and second, okay with the language that's presented on the screen?
Yes.
Further discussion on this motion? So the motion is to table agenda item number 7 until presentation of the comprehensive plan and the parks and open space plan, with council taking no action inconsistent with their venue tax status regarding the properties themselves until that time. Is motion clear? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, we are tabling this until the conditions are met, and thank you for working through that. And thank you for everybody who has shown up and provided their input. This is important for council to hear, especially as we move forward with both the ad hoc committee, which, you know, again, we want to make sure that we're getting value out of that, but one of the goals is to, you know, have an idea of what the citizens and residents want for these spaces. But we also want to keep in mind the intention behind purchasing them so that we can do this in a comprehensive fashion as well. So thank you for everybody who attended that.
And please attend the comp plan, public meetings, super, super, super important.
Yeah. So council, are we ready to move on? Do we need a break? Are we okay to move on to agenda item number 8? All right, agenda item number 8 then. Presentation, discussion, and possible action on utilizing open town hall for public comments for city council and public meetings. And this is co-sponsored by Councilmember Reitz and Councilmember Rosengarten. So we'll start with staff, and then we'll give the sponsors a chance to discuss before we make any motions. So, sure.
Okay, so I believe that this item really stemmed out of a council discussion item, a council and staff discussion item that we had at the retreat in March. And Open Town Hall obviously was brought on along with OpenGov, and it was used primarily in 2020. It started as a way for residents to engage with the council while we were in the midst of a global pandemic, and you know, all the meetings were virtual and everything was just topsy-turvy. And so we, staff working with the mayor and council at the time brought on Open Town Hall, and we decided to have a forum for every single council meeting, at pretty much every public meeting. And, you know, generally, for committee meetings, you don't see a comment, but for most council meetings, there are, you know, at least a few comments, you know, items like tonight or the 6405 Brody, you know, you see a lot more engagement with the forum. In looking back to that council discussion at March, I know one of the council's frustrations with Open Town Hall is that it is more akin to social media. There is a support feature, which is very much like a like feature. Also, council said, you know, people will frequently post, you know, right up, you know, when the meeting's about to start. Council maybe hasn't had a chance to read the comment and you know, think about the comment. So it was just really an open discussion and saying, okay, now that we're back to in-person meetings for now, you know, where do we want to move forward with Open Town Hall? And also there were some questions asked. I know, you know, some meetings, you know, the mayor would, read every comment into the record. And I think there was just some legal questions like, okay, what is required when it is written communication, what is required? So I did do some research. I have talked to legal, so I did want to update the council with that. I said I would have an answer for you. So, so written communication, it does not have to be read into the record. Best practice, Barbara and I discussed best practice would be to say, you know, and this is before Open Town Hall, this is what the mayor and or city secretary would generally do. You know, we had, 4 comments in favor, we had 6 comments, opposed. Sometimes residents would say this, I'm speaking before Open Town Hall. Sometimes residents would write in saying, please read this into the record. And, the mayor might oblige them. That's really the mayor's call. There's nothing in the local government code or even in our code that says that a comment has to be read into the record. So moving forward, council can, you guys can take no action and leave it as is. I did put several options over. You can leave open town hall there and maybe just remove the support feature. You can put a posting deadline. We could say, by noon or by 3 or even by 5. Now we're having work sessions, so 5 o'clock might not be a good time. You could remove open town hall. We could still use the service. It is great for getting feedback on, other things. It's really easy to use for like resident surveys, so it is a useful tool. And we could create a form on the city website, as I think Helen suggested. We could, staff could come up with a way we could use our new website. Thankfully, has a really easy form option. Now it wouldn't be, they wouldn't be seen by all the public. The form would be submitted, the comments would be submitted, and then it would be staff's role to make sure those comments get distributed. So I'll open it up to questions and comments.
And I'll give it a chance for the sponsors to speak to this item too. So Councilmember Rosengarten. Oh, you're.
As Matt has stated, is that at times the statements would come in last minute before our council meeting or workshop, and we haven't had time to read them. In fact, that just happened today again. I was up till 1 o'clock last night reading council and workshop, getting prepared for today's meeting, and I read 6 of them. Then I get to the meeting and I see there's 8 more, and I'm like, so I'm trying to read while other people are talking, but I want to be prepared. It's confusing and difficult. I shouldn't say confusing. It's difficult to be prepared for one item while you're reading for another item. So because of that, I'm suggesting that there be, on one part, there be a cutoff time. The other thing is the like button. It does feel like social media. And let's face it, algorithms have no part in government. We should get rid of the like button. The other part is there are statements that are made that are incorrect and are not validated with staff before they're posted. So you have an incorrect statement that goes to the whole city immediately. And then we feel like we're playing whack-a-mole because we have to put out the doggone mole. We have to hit the mole on the head. We have to calm everybody down. And that's not the part of council. We're volunteers. We still have full-time jobs. So we've got a lot of work on our plates since opening the addition of Open Town Hall. Previously, people would send us an email and we would read our email, but it wouldn't go to the whole city, even if it wasn't an factual statement. It wouldn't go to the whole city. It went to us. And then we could then respond directly back to that resident and say, here's the information that we have. Do you still feel this way? Is there something else we need to work on? But when it goes to the whole city, before anyone can bring them up to speed on an issue, it's really difficult. So those are my issues with Open Town Hall. Thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think the other issue that I've had with it is that, well, first of all, I was the one who sponsored all of this OpenGov process it was mostly from a financial standpoint. That was the most critical factor for me, was the financial transparency. This was an added bonus. This was like, wow, this is great. The problem that I see, and I'm just going to be as blunt as I can be here, is that people tell lies on it. They say incorrect information. They create some have created very hostile environments for our staff. And frankly, it is our job as council to protect our staff. That is our role. We are their employers. And in this room, we have rules of decorum that everybody has to follow. That doesn't seem, there's no way to enforce that on the OpenGov Town Hall without somebody constantly monitoring it. And that's very time consuming. And when we have tried to monitor it, we have gotten all kinds of blowback. Oh, you can't do that. You can't restrict my my free speech, et cetera. It's become an issue that is gotten out of control, unfortunately. And it's a shame. To me, it's very disappointing. But we now have meetings that are open now. Anyone can come, anyone can say their piece. There's also I think the other process that we can implement is some type of email or some type of process where you can post a comment that would go to the council, that they would still hear your individual thoughts if you can't make it to the meeting. Because it is important to get all your thoughts in. But, I mean, it's like last week, or the last meeting we had, I can't remember the agenda item, but there was a whole comment. It was all about how we're going to mess with the Board of Adjustments. And the agenda item had nothing to do with Board of Adjustments. And so there was all this information out there that we're messing with the Board of Adjustments. That's just an example. And that wasn't the case at all. And you really kind of have to sit through the entire meeting to see what happens. And I don't know about you, but I'm thinking a lot of people have better things to do. But I don't know, maybe they do. So it is my thoughts that this is a tool that we use more sparingly. I think something like with a very direct question, it's a great tool with a very direct question. We want your input on this. That type of thing. This very open-ended, which allows people to say anything they want, any complaint and not that I don't want to hear complaints, because complaints are an important part. And negative thoughts, I mean, we still need to hear negative thoughts as well as positive thoughts, but it can't be to the point where it creates more of a hostile work environment for our staff. And there have been some cases where that has happened. And without a way to monitor it, we need to figure out a way where we can still get input, but yet still keep accurate information out there.
Councilmember Johnson.
So, in my mind, like fully removing technology or the ability to kind of like send it electronically is not the solution. Some like tweaks for sure, but to me, like this is the tried and true format. This has been with us a long time, and I feel like comments on open town hall should more closely kind of like resemble that. If not having them far enough ahead of time, well, we had plenty of people come up here, and it's just like we're just taking them as they come. So it's like it's nice. It's just like with the questions for Meet the Candidates. It's like it's really nice to get them ahead of time, because it's like when we're deciding up here on different issues, we have enough time to actually. We have enough time to actually think about it. So. Some of the things that are added on, which doesn't have an analog to in-person, like support. I mean, we don't expect people out there to go like, here, as someone makes a good point. I don't think there's no part of that in like how we run meetings. So yeah, get that out of there. The editing kind of drives me nuts, because I've seen that before and I've also, somebody in this room has also like changed their stance on something almost as like it was a message board, and that's like not. So I'd be in favor of just like kind of making them private from the city. That also gets us away from people just putting false statements that are just like out there for like Google to find or whatever. It's a little bit harder when people, and I know the hostile work environment. We saw a comment tonight. If that isn't hostile work environment, then I don't know. So I don't know what we do about that. You know what I mean? Well, no, I totally agree. But we let it happen. So it's just like,
we'd like better building security.
Yeah. But I mean, like, we do have decorum. Like that's like what we're expected of up here. But I don't know what we ask of people right there, because I've seen that for 10 years. And it's just like, well, that's just him. 11 years, sorry. But, okay, so, yeah, sorry. Yeah, the number of supporters, I actually find it quite useful, but like, I totally get it. It just becomes like a like button. And it's like, if you really do support it, then just like leave your own comment. I mean, it's like the lazy man's,
Correct.
whatever. Sorry, I had one other thing in here. Maybe I didn't, but you know, actually the idea of like, you know, if you post to it, and again, like keeping it private from like just everyone, so that just like misinformation can't just be out there, then it's just whatever. Because we can almost address things in person, you know.
Correct.
But I do like the idea of, because it has an analog of here, like people can email us, people can email amongst themselves and stuff like that. But, you know, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable or just can't make a meeting, like a council meeting, I do like the idea, it may not be part of our, I'm having like a really hard time retrieving words today, but it's not part of our ordinances or anything, but like, if you can say in your comment, like, I would like this read into the record, like, it's just, you know, please do this, and it almost becomes like a, sorry, it's a bummer, but you gotta do it. Mm-hmm. Because they would have that option here. You know, we're not gonna stop anyone from, so, I don't know. It's like a word salad of a bunch of ideas here, but I
think though, just in response, you know, if we are starting to put these kind of like framework of restrictions on it, like let's make it private, let's add like an option to like maybe check a box in favor, or I wanted this read in the public comment. This tool is not the best tool for that, and maybe like a form on the web page that we can control and design that gets disseminated or archived, right? And maybe it's creating like a place for us to go to, or maybe it's emailing us all. But basically, that seems like it's almost the better tool than what OpenGov is. I'm not sure how flexible OpenGov is in creating sort of like the things that we would want, like keeping, like I said, like keeping it private or keeping it not open, and then maybe even like having some options that could be checked off as part of a comment saying I'm in favor or I'm opposed, or I'm neither favor or opposed, but you know, some more guidance, right, in terms of like, you know, how we summarize these things or how they are, you know, given off, you know, for the mayor to read. That being said, yeah, that's just said, like OpenGov, I'm not sure is the right tool if we're going to go down that path of trying to make it a little more useful for our needs.
Yeah, and I think I said this like quite a few months ago. In a lot of businesses, but especially like software, like you try a tool and then you throw it out, and there's no shame in it. It's just like you tried something, it didn't work. Like I think this was a great exercise. It helped us out in a pinch, and it allowed people to stay engaged. And it's not the right tool, and that's fine.
Well, what's important for me is that residents and the public have a clear understanding of how they can contribute to the, you know, providing us feedback, right? Yeah. Coming in person, that's the number one way, because that's the way we were doing before. And, you know, email is what we were doing before. But I think we can extend that, given that people are much maybe reluctant to attend in person. We want to have an option for people to say, I cannot attend, I want this read. That seems like something we can accommodate. It's not going to be everybody who does that, but it's like and we want to direct people in the right way to provide that and ensure that it is getting to everybody, that it's not just going in a hole, and that maybe part of that is preserving it, you know, a record of it for attachment in the minutes, or preserving it as part of on the website somewhere, right? Eventually, so where it becomes something. I don't know. You know, there may be some. You know, making sure that council is getting that information is probably the critical step, right? Just so that the residents know that we are receiving it. Because what I don't want is residents to feel like they're just submitting things and maybe it's getting diverted into like, you know, a black hole, right?
To that point though, it's like, I definitely read it because it's out there, you know, so it's like, you really can't ignore it. I want to hear people's ideas anyway, but like, you know, it's much harder to ignore it when everyone can see it.
Councilor Litchfield.
Yeah, so to my mind, so OpenGov has been invaluable. I think it's fantastic for like getting feedback, like contributes to like the small d democratic part of our process. I think it's been really great. It provides a lot of signal. It also generates a fair amount of noise. And I think that there are, and like to this point, like you're absolutely right. And there's like some kind of negative behaviors that happen on it. But I'm not quite ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater until we have kind of a better plan. I'm kind of like a free speech absolutist in general, so like the idea of censoring the comments as they come in is just like anathema. But what we do need is we need a tool that's super easy to use. There's like really clear feedback. People know how to use it. It has to be attributable to a person, at least like in theory, right? We can't have anonymous comments from folks. Like that doesn't serve our democratic process. I think a really nice feature, and so here's where like, let's design the product we wish we had, right? And then like see what's the delta from OpenGov. Maybe it's too far and we need to get something built. We know people that can do stuff like that. I think that like people need to know how to do it. It needs to be easy. It has to have their name. I think it should have something like an embargo, because a big problem is kind of the piling on, I think. Or I think that's kind of like what's caused a lot of stress, is people will like write a scathing comment and then somebody else is like, oh yeah, I've got a zinger too. And this is like, like not civil discourse. But publishing them, but if we had like an embargo where it's like, look, it's written, only council can see it, like council and staff can see it. As soon as the city council meeting starts, bam, it's public. It's out there, because the whole public statements, like your name, your real world identity is tied to the statement is important. You know, like that's a cost of standing up here. Like if you say something, you know, stupid or whatever, you know, we'll all think that's silly. But so that's an important cost. But like if we could just say like, look, we publish them all at 6 o'clock. If some guy's like standing up here at the podium at 6 o'clock and runs his mouth, we just kind of like do, if somebody like publishes a comment at 6 o'clock, that's totally insane too, like, or whatever, like, that's fine. Like, we just let it be. It's freedom of speech. You know, the freedom of speech wasn't like to make sure that everybody can talk about the weather. Like the value is like, we should be able to say contentious things that are hurtful and mean. And like, I don't want that to happen. Like society can like push that back. But that's what it was designed for. Like, that's the crucible that came out of. But so I think that like maybe OpenGov can't do it, but I would love if like we had something on the website that was like, here's the form, put in your name, put in your address, whatever, and then you submit comments. They're broadcast to council and staff, maybe in real time, maybe as they come in, because I don't see some of them until late, which sucks. So like maybe they come in as they get posted and then they get published at meeting time. Maybe we have a cutoff then. I like reading the comments that happen during the meetings. Like I want to hear what people are thinking. So I don't know, I could be moved either way on that feature. But I do think there's the right tool. And until we have that better tool, I think we should stick with OpenGov, just even though it's not great. I think that the value it provides is much, much bigger than the risk to people's job security or whatever, like this, like hostile work environment stuff. Like I think that that's like less than the benefit that it provides to the city at this point. And then, yeah, let's do something better.
Councilmember Johnson.
I remember, like, as soon as I got sworn in, I asked Sylvia for like, hey, can I see the back end of this? To, like, see what other options? And she's like, well, there isn't. And I was like, actually, like, this is a supremely simple tool. So towards that, like, what can we turn on and turn off?
So we can turn off the support. We can't, Sylvia just checked, we can't make it, you can't make it so that it's, so people can still post and that it's private only to, you know, like council and staff. Well, do you have something?
Yep. So Matt and Carolyn can talk to you about the website's capabilities, but originally it was developed much like a public comment tool. When anybody comes up to public comment, we are not supposed to respond. The council is not supposed to respond to that person speaking. What can happen is the mayor can then turn to staff and direct staff to do something, direct staff to bring back information, direct staff to write a report, direct staff to do all of that. But there is no specific public engagement. And the difference between Open Town Hall and that particular process is, in that vein, council can direct staff to provide a report to correct a narrative that was at a podium in a public forum. We don't comment back. Originally, when it was first launched, the directive from the then mayor was to respond to incorrect comments. Well, you saw how that went with one comment. Like it was a poop bomb all over the place. So that's not it. The most that Open Town Hall has right now is a terms of service, meaning we set a rule of decorum, much like we do in the public, and if they agree to abide by that term, they check the box and their comment gets published. If they don't agree, which who's not going to agree, then it's only visible to us. But that's really the only filter. If I hide the topic, nobody can see it except us, and that's not beneficial. And in terms of censoring and trying to filter comments and disseminate what's true and what isn't, man, you may as well make me guard the Facebook page, because I can't do it. I can't do it. And in terms of hostile, man, I think that's an understatement. Because what it does, it then leads a narrative, a different narrative of what is actually happening. And I can tell you right now with all certainty that the people that you see up here today will not be here in 5 years, will not be here in 10 years. I can tell you that on my first grandchild. But what follows us is going to be some of that negative rhetoric that was posted out there. I don't know, maybe that's intentional by the folks posting, but I sure would hate to be the reason why Matt can't get a promotion in another city, or Carolyn can't get a job, or Susanna can't get a job, or Chief wants to get out of public service altogether. Those are the things, well, you say you're a public comment purist, so am I, but our right stops when it infringes on somebody else's.
The website version.
I was just going to say that the web form, we could design it with all of those parameters, like, a name is required. Now, someone could put a fake name or something, but, you guys know who residents are. But, you can put parameters. We could put a checkbox of, I'd like this right into the record. We can put, we can have it so that it's emailed directly to council members and to staff. Now, in terms of, we normally don't, written comments have always been, back in the day when they were paper comments, they were filed with the agenda. Now, they're saved online, but we could publish them, with them. If you wanted, this is to Councilmember Litchfield's point, if you wanted them published, I don't know about publishing them right at 6. You all would have seen them, but, if you want, those comments to be heard, just as, if someone was coming here speaking, we could publish those comments, those formal submitted comments, we could publish them with the minutes. Like, hey, these were the official, written comments sent in. So, but there's a lot more flexibility with the website form, but it will be, we can set it to be emailed to certain staff and to the council. And it can also be provided to you guys, like on the dais as well.
So the gap between, where I want to keep them separate from the minutes, like quite intentionally so, because I don't want somebody to be like, what happened at the city council meeting? Oh, I'll go read the comments instead of the minutes, because there's probably some TLDR stuff in there. Yeah, that is the wrong thing. They should not see the comments maybe until after they've seen the minutes. Okay. But again, this is just a presentation of information. It's it's cool product questions to ask, and I don't get to do much software product work up here, so I'm gonna geek out a bit.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, and having the comments as part of the minutes, when what we say isn't even part of the minutes, and we're the big show up here, but it's just I don't know.
Well,
you're on YouTube.
The record is the video. The minutes is, yes, the formal record is the video. So our comments are part of the record. So council, I think there's a lot of good ideas. I would like us to have, if we're going to do anything tonight, I would say let's disable the support feature. I think it's kind of an unnecessary sort of confusion in terms of how that's used and where that support's coming from, and it's not really part of this dialogue. I would also like us to move towards evaluating using the website as a way of capturing this, but maybe keeping as that's something we evaluate, not necessarily until we see something and what it would look like before we disable anything on Open Town Hall. Give people another chance to also provide comments, and how that mechanism would work, how it would get disseminated, things like that. That's my personal preference, but we do have residents that wish to speak to this item as well, and I want to get their input, but they have to write it in Open Town Hall before I'll read it, so just kidding, sorry. But it is, part of this is that this is a great tool that we had in conjunction with a number of limitations. We've seen, though, that there is some continuity of the benefits of transparency and the benefits of having this dialogue that we don't want to necessarily completely lose, right? And the option for people not to attend in person because of preference, because of need, because of, we are in a different environment than we were 2 years ago when we didn't even consider some of these technical tools that can help us and aid us in this. So with that, I'll pass it on to the public for input into our discussion.
All right. So John Papola, 40 Pillow. So this is a kind of surprising thing that you guys have brought up, because I'm 44, but I'm on the internet all the time. I use a lot of these tools all the time. It's really, it's the dialogue here feels incredibly retrograde, to be perfectly honest, about, people's feelings are getting hurt on the internet in a public forum about city government. Like, yes, that's going to happen. It's going to happen on Facebook. It's going to happen in email. It's going to happen in a lot of places. I think it's what you sign up for when you run for city council, when you work for government and have power over the rest of our lives to some degree. You're going to have to put up with heat, or get out of the kitchen. So, I'm with Councilmember Justin on being a free speech absolutist in the context of government in particular, which is where free speech is actually the issue. It's like, do we have, you are government, so I think this forum's pretty powerful, more specific. So I just think aesthetically, it's not a great look to enable a public forum for a small city and turn it off because you didn't like the comments. I just want to put that out there, that I think that's a bad call. As far as a tool, though, I was looking at some of the comments and seeing some of my neighbors who are, over 65 years old, using the tool. And this is a tool that the city's already purchased and citizens have adopted. Now, I have tried really hard over the years to get my own employees, who I pay, to adopt tools and use them. It's really hard. So I think it's a mistake to throw, like, there's a baby out with the bathwater idea, but adopting tools, or adopting, we are going to build our own tools. We're a small city. Building digital tools is not a great idea for City of Sunset Valley. I think that's a mistake. I think you should let it be what it is. Set a rule that you're not going to read things beyond a certain time. That's fine. Just put that at the top. Like, if you post a comment after a certain amount of time, we are not going to be able to read it. That's fine. I think if people say things that are questionable in terms of their accuracy, that's all the more reason for them to be in public, where other people can comment and where sunshine can work. It's imperfect. People are misinformed. But man, oh man, there's a lot of so-called misinformation. The label misinformation has been weaponized in ways that are really deleterious to democracy and civil discourse. And bringing that kind of conversation to the city level is really deeply disturbing, and I think we should just avoid that too. So I'm strongly in favor of leaving this the way it is, and dealing with it, frankly, because this is the business you guys are in, and I think it's important to just recognize you're not going to be able to escape people getting up here saying outrageous stuff about wars and murder and horrible things. There's all kinds of horrible stuff getting said, but you're not going to put this fire out. You're just going to open up a whole lot of very justified criticism that you turned off a public forum. I think that's, I know a lot of you personally. I know you don't want to really do that. I know you're trying to look out for employees and their emotional well-being, and I think that's entirely justifiable. I think, these tools have a lot of downsides, but I think in this case, the upside does outweigh the downside. The other thing is, when people put toxic stuff in the public, this is a small town. We walk around, we see each other. They have to bear that cost too. They're making a fool out of themselves. So I don't think it comes costlessly in this particular case, the way it does on Facebook and Twitter, where people are just turned into little demons. We walk down the street, we look each other in the eye. You post something crazy, you're feeling the cost. So I get where you're coming from. I empathize with it, but I really strongly advocate for you leaving the tool as it is, by and large, especially for the older members of our community who have learned how to use it. And you're going to impose a steep cost on them to teach them yet another tool to learn. And it's going to mean less engagement with the city, not more. Thank you.
Melissa?
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. As a person who uses it and tries to get other people to use it, they have a hard time using it. You would get, if it were easier to use, more people would use it. But even people who are really savvy have trouble using it. I mean, long-standing members of our community don't know how to do it. I tried to get 3 people to post this, I can't find it. So it still needs to get easier. It still needs to get easier. You might have more comments that you liked and not be trying to shut it down if it was easier for people to use. So I agree with everything Terry Cowan wrote. I agree with everything John Popola wrote, just said. That said, and if you do shut it down, the blowback is going to be enormous. People in this town do not like to be quieted in that way. You know, it's only going to have a new newsletter. It's only going to have a new website. People are not going to like it, and it's not going to reflect well on this council to shut things down. We need to make it easier for people to talk. And it is exactly as he said, a small town. When we started this, and I would say something, I would have a fairly organized group of people refute what I do. There would be the city administrator who would refute it, and there would be other people who didn't like my position refuting it on a pretty regular basis. So I had to not post until late. The material wouldn't come out, and so you couldn't post until the last thing. If you even care about the like function and you have 5, not that I do, it's already used up if you post early. So it's all very pointless. But to prevent people from talking and trying to tell their story, especially when they have really strong experiences, that's a problem. We really need to encourage dialogue, and we need more people involved in this process, not less. And it's always been crazy in this town. If you don't remember, you know, that's what it was like. Then you weren't here for the well discussions. You weren't here for any number of things where I thought there would be blood on the floor. You know, and it is so much friendlier now than it has been in our past. Thank you.
Ken?
I think I like speaking after John because he covers a lot of things I'm going to say, so I'll keep it short. I think Gethan Car Road 36 Lone Oak Trail. I think to a couple of the points, I'm glad you all clarified why this agenda item came up. I certainly understand the idea of protecting staff, and because there's a certain, you all signed up for this, but that's not necessarily the case for the staff and all. So I appreciate that. I think as far as, I agree with the points that were said earlier about sunlight being the best disinfectant, and, and the fact that people who say crazy or mean or disingenuous things and attach their name to it in public, they bear a cost with that as well, by putting their own name, with their comments and all. So I think that's something to keep in mind. We talked about the ease of commenting for seniors, but I think it also applies to a lot of people. We have a lot of folks with young families and young kids and all too, and it's counting, what our demographics are for our population. I think people being able to comment who may not be able to come from 6 to 8 on a weeknight to comment on a meeting, giving them this forum also where they can share something, I think is important as well. As far as the people making misstatements or misinformation, either deliberately or unintentionally, but not necessarily knowing the whole story and assuming things, that whether that happens on open town hall or whether that happens in people sending us emails right before the meeting starts, during meetings, coming up and saying it at the meeting, it used to happen like when I was on council. I'm sure it happens to y'all as well. At least this way, their statement is being made publicly. Otherwise, I'm sure you all have gotten them too. I'd get the email from someone at 5 o'clock that would have all sorts of statements in there, sometimes it would say, please don't share that I've made this comment, please don't read it into the record. I'm like, well, I can't do that because I won't necessarily put your name on it voluntarily, but if someone makes an open records request, you better believe that's going to come out, that then your name's attached to it. I'd rather have those comments be out in the open than in the shadows where people can see who's making those comments and all. So just to keep that in mind. As far as the like and support button, I don't know what the concern so much is. I was actually going to suggest the other way. If there's not a reason why it has to be limited to 5 people, why even have that restriction? Have people like. I can see not having a dislike button because that becomes, we don't want to introduce more negativity into it. But why even have a limitation on how many comments that you can like? If you like what your neighbors say, why not be able to like more than 5? I agree with more than 5 of my neighbors. And why not be able to express that in using the tool that we have? And so those are the suggestions and comments that I would have. The other thing is we focused on the negativity of this, and I think a lot of times there's a tendency to focus on the negativity. I've found the open town hall discussion to be a very educational and elevating process too, because there's times when people have positive comments, there's people who have comments that about something I wouldn't have thought of. And it's like, hey, if they would have sent that comment just to you, I would have never been exposed to that thought process and to that perspective. And to have that in a way that people can share publicly, I think sometimes elevates our discourse, but we don't focus on that because we're focusing on the negativity. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. So Council, it's kind of up to us in terms of like where we want to move forward, but one of the other options I think that we didn't really talk about was how we handle, if we leave the things as is. I think one thing that we could do, and just make this clear to the public, is that these are not going to be read into the record. They are there for people to review. They're just like email in that case. We don't read everybody's emails into the record. These statements can exist on their own, and it's council's prerogative to spotlight them as much as they want. They themselves could bring forward statements and say, I want to read this, but otherwise we treat it just like email, right? It just becomes something that information is a one-way information to us, but it's not obligated to represent that. That is reserved for people who come here in person, for speaking in public, right? I think that maybe even just taking that step could reduce some of the confusion about, how we handle this, even if we're leaving it as it is. That's another option I was considering as well, as we're getting this feedback too, because I started that process, of saying, while we're in this COVID environment, we're in this kind of, space where people cannot come and present to us. I wanted to act on behalf of them. We're past that. And I think that we're just giving some clear guidance to the public saying, if we keep this up, this is here, it's a forum. Council can treat it just like they would get an email. If they're getting an email from residents, the benefit of this is that we do have the public, view on it and eyes on it, and everybody can share and see it. But we're not going to take every statement and make a record of it, right? In that sense, that's another option that we could do as well. So, Councilor Rosengren.
So on Kenton's point, before it was open up to the public to speak, I was going to mention some of the positives of it. Positive is, I can open every one of the comments and go ahead and copy all of them and save them with my council meeting. So I have all of them with all my notes, with all my meetings and so on. That is a plus. The other plus is that it's not getting lost in other emails, because we get lots of emails. So I immediately have them, all comments just for council. I know exactly where they're at when I can go and read them. So those are the 2 pluses of it. Again, for me, the like button, I would get rid of it. That's my opinion.
Councilor Johnson.
I keep on coming back in my mind to decorum and structured conversation that we're required to have here. And I have this buddy who's like a tech entrepreneur, and he says, anytime when you're working on like a platform or an app or whatever, it's like anytime you add a photo, it becomes a dating app. So it's like as soon as you can add a user photo, it becomes it's like, oh, that person, okay, yeah. And unfortunately, like with the ability to kind of like comment back and forth, it's just like, this isn't a message board. this is like, we want to get the feedback, but y'all are having this whole thing. It's like, you can do that anywhere on the internet. Anywhere on the internet, you can, go have a conversation. But I don't know. It's just like there's this kind of like side discussion. It's just like this is the structure of it. We're gonna read them, and we're gonna like listen to opposing viewpoints, and people are gonna come in here, and we're gonna put together motions, and like we're bound to this. And the idea that it's just like, well, I should just be able to say whatever I want. It's just like, yeah, you can, you can't, like if you get called into court, you can't just say like, well, can I just text the judge? I got a phone. Let me just text him. It's just like, no, this is government. This is it right here. Like, and it's been around for a long time. And it's like, there are, again, sites all over the internet where you can just like discuss things that are happening. But like when we have an agenda, which we have to post at a certain time, and it's like, if you have a comment on it, go ahead and leave it. And it's like, I like that. I like that everyone's able to like read what people say. But again, there's like a few features where it's just like, it's not a discussion in there. It's like that's like where the embargo kind of seems, I kind of like the idea of embargo because it's more analogous to like what happens here. It's just like, I mean, we would get to potentially, hell, have the embargo be against us as well. Where it's just like, boom, they show up, just like somebody standing there at the thing. Because then it's just like the conversation is happening. This kind of structure has been around a long time, and just because we have technology to throw at it does not mean that it's just like all technology is good all the time. I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter because it's a cesspool. And it's like, I do think that, we look at some of these comments and, as you read them, you're just like, oh, that's a little bit harsh. I mean, I don't think we're not, it's not like Godwin's Law going on in the open town hall or anything, but it's like, and different people might feel that it's like out of line, but I don't think we've ever actually had to, like, just as a straw man, what would someone have to say on there for us to just be like, take that down? And I also have not read the terms of service, that box that I ticked with.
Yeah, we don't have rules right now. Like, there's nothing in place to say, okay, this is violating, because we do have the,
is it like obscenity?
We do have the
or
ethics
like pornography,
ordinance.
we know it when we see it,
But
it would just be like, well, that one's really bad.
Yeah.
So maybe that is like a signal that it's like, it hasn't gotten as bad as maybe we think. So, or, it hasn't gotten as bad as maybe potentially it gets projected as, but, I don't want to lose sight of like, there are plenty of alternatives. It's like, if you wanted to go, it's public property, if you want to go stand out there in the lawn out there and say something like, we're not going to restrain you. You can also go up here and say whatever you want, but it's just like, this tool is for like council meetings, and it's just like, if we are bound to like the structure, then it's just like everyone else should kind of like fall in line. I don't want anyone to be censored, but it's just like there's like training that we had to go through in order to like have these conversations, and like all we're asking for is like a little bit of the same. But again, maybe I'm saying like, if it was that bad, then yeah, we should do something about it. But like, as I feel right now, it's just like maybe it's not as bad as like we sometimes kind of like feel it creeping up to, but then it just kind of like goes back down and everyone's just like, okay, we got past that contentious agenda item. Anyway.
Councilor Reitz.
I think, to me, if there's a way to make the comments follow our rules of decorum, but that means somebody has to monitor it and somebody has to make that decision and stuff, and that's more work for our staff, and it's an element of judgment in there, so that makes it difficult. I mean, I kind of feel like the mom who says, "Oh, we can't have nice things," and so it's like, I don't know. I think for the most part, I really like reading the comments. It gives me a lot more insight, and I think I'm sure we all do. It is those ones, those ones that, the inaccurate information that goes out, and it's written very authoritatively, and it's written by people that have been around a long time, and so you trust. And so, you know, it's difficult when it's incorrect. And, you know, and so you're constantly, I would imagine our staff is fighting these battles. No, that's not right, you know, spending all this time. It's very inefficient. Not that government is efficient, I get that. And it should be an open forum, but as I think Councilmember Rob here said, there are rules, and we have a methodology for people to come and give comments and stuff, and that has happened for the last, 40 years here, and so that worked. And this helped us through COVID, and that was very helpful. So I don't know, I have two minds about it. If there was a way to keep it within the decorum rules, if we could figure that out, then I'd be okay with this. But I think that's a critical part of it. We have to follow those rules. And in fact, you know, even when people come here, we should step up maybe our enforcement of those decorum rules also. So my personal opinion. So that's my thoughts.
So just real quick, just looking at the Open Town Hall site, there are guidelines for civility that are referenced, which talks about personal attacks, which talks about those things being reasons to move posts to other web pages. Basically, if you go to like a topic like the council meeting tonight, and you click on that and you click your statement, and you scroll down, check out our guidelines for civility. It sounds like, you know, Open Town Hall is monitoring for this, but I assume it's the site, you know, the people at our site doing this. I assume we could probably change this language to match our rules of decorum, or we could just enforce this, right? Where if you scroll down, it's like, here's a disruptive statement, here's what we do with it. We don't edit it, we don't delete it, but it gets moved to a different page. And here's the difference between, you know, here's the thing, you know, examples. There's a personal attack, non-personal attack. We could enforce this, right? And that's obviously taking staff time, but, you know, it could be a council member saying, this is not following the rules here. We're going to move this to a different site and contact the author per this rules. That's an option, right? You know, there is some guidance already in place, and it's, you know, presumably there for this very dialogue, right? In terms of, you know, what if somebody's posting pornography, you know, in the context of, you know, a site that's like a dating site, right? You know, there's rules for that. Councilmember Johnson.
I find us also kind of, we're trying to solve a problem that, like, like the misinformation thing, like, we might just need to, like, go pull in some comments where you're just like, I don't know if I would ever, I don't think there's been one that I read that I'm just like, this is an issue. There was a situation where, like, you know, there was something directed towards me, and as John said, it was just like, it made them look more foolish than it made me look foolish. I mean, at least from my perspective. And so it's just like, I just didn't care. I was like, whatever. But the thing is, like, I'm not going to make that decision for everyone else, but, like, if there are, you know, what is, like, kind of gone under the bridge is done, but it's just like, as they come up, I want to see, like, what the, like, a comment that somebody has an issue with, just be like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it right here. I know, and, you know, as for, like, how a message gets moved, I know Sylvia has no interest in being that person, but, like, nobody over there wants to do it, and I get that. But, like, like, what would that process look like? Would it take another resident to be like, this one is whatever? But then, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It could just be like, what's that term for when you're kind of like freeze someone? I'm really having really bad recall today. The like a chilling, it's like everyone just like chills each other, where it's just like all of a sudden there's like no comments except the most anodyne things. But yeah, like I want to start seeing the actual comments that we have an issue with, and then just like throw them out here and just be like, this is why this one's an issue. And maybe that's like too elementary to, you know, it seems like a silly thing to do, but it's just like, you know, if we're just talking in like kind of vague, like there's misinformation, it's like, well, let's bring it and let's talk about it. I don't know.
So if I could offer a, what I think is perhaps a positive solution amongst it all. One, we turn on the terms to remind folks about the rules of civility and our rules of decorum here. That's the first one. I don't particularly care about the support. It you know, doesn't really make a difference to me. It drives some people's behavior, and you know, the Facebook will tell you that people get addicted to how many likes they want. All right, fine. If you're crazy and want all the likes, you go on, knock yourself out. But I do personally believe that we need to have an ability as a collective body to address those things that are misinformation that don't continue to drive. And that may be as a subsequent meeting. For example, this is April 19th. If there's anything that's posted on there in the staff report for May the 3rd, we get to say these things were posted on Open Town Hall. This is the narrative. This is the fact. This is the narrative. This is the fact. Period. Done. So we've not addressed it as it was at the podium, but we've at least addressed the information. I don't know.
We see this happen at a national level, though. Like, you have your facts, I have my facts. You know?
True.
Right.
True.
And especially because the contention is largely around people dissatisfied around staff performance on certain issues, right? And so then if staff is saying like, no, this is the absolute fact, like the word of God, like that's just not gonna, like that's a bad look. Like this is, like people, it's kind of funny because we saw, and it's probably like impolitic to say this, but like probably, you know, Ms. Gonzalez over there is like the cause of a lot of this issues. And she even talked about how she will now not post her comments until the last minute so that people don't like offer corrections and stuff, right? And so that's something where like the process is like messy but kind of working, because now if like this comment that's maybe has things that people disagree with, which is awesome, like let's disagree in public, like that's what we're here for. You know, maybe that's not coming in till the last minute, and so we don't see it, and so now it's not actually as effective as it could be. And I don't know, this is happening in real time in a way where there's a lot of disagreement around things that there's a lot of disagreement about. Like, there's never been a ton of comments on something that we passed on consent, right? Like, the public is reacting to things and like telling us that these are important. I have thoughts about it. Please take this seriously. Here's what I see. This is what I see. And, you know, and that's the things that we should take seriously. The amount of signal that we get out of there is very, very high. Like, I want to just reiterate that. I get very educated with some of these comments sometimes. I can also see that some of them are probably off base, or maybe this was a little bit uncivil. You know, maybe this would have been better. But again, like, there's follow-on comments that are like, no, this person was wrong when they said that. And I don't know, it's not ideal, but like nothing, but there's also no solution where somebody says like, this was wrong.
So just as a kind of, because we're getting late in the night and we still have a couple more agenda items, including, well, one agenda item and then executive session. So we're going to extend the meeting. I would like us to have a way of presenting the terms to the residents that's clear, to say, these are what this is a code of conduct and it applies to your post here. Then we try that out. If there's egregious, you know, continued like, you know, violation of that, we need to then develop a process for saying what happens next, right? You know, are we going to start, who's going to be the person is the mayor, you know, probably is going to be the person who's going to be tasked with like, okay, we're going to take the next actions, right? If we can't, if we either go all unlimited support or we just remove support, because the idea of like 5 support is just weird, you know, and just having that. I would just say turn off support and just let's try that out, you know, and if people are, well, I would also just say the clear discussion is that this is information that council, I will, you know, at the beginning of the meeting, I will draw attention to the fact that there are X number of comments for this agenda item, or, you know, in some context, but I'm not going to read them into the record. It's up to council to take that information, digest it, and if you're posting late, some council members aren't going to read it. You know, it's just, that's the risk, is that you're posting at 5:59, Rudy prepares the night before, that's the risk, you know, it's just, you know, that, but it's up to council to say, I want to draw information from here and I want to, you know, bring it and discuss it, right? That's, any of you can do that anytime, but, you know, I think if we start with those conditions, we put the terms, the clear terms, if there are some, you know, areas where we say, this is not meeting our terms, what do we do about it? Let's highlight those, talk about them, and then talk about the process for, you know, what the next steps are. And that's, like I said, probably coming up with a system where it's likely going to be one of us or the mayor, because I don't think we want staff to take on the responsibility and the heat for doing that, you know, maybe we take turns. Yeah. So I think if we make those changes, then we can iterate, right? This is something that, but you know, I think people need to understand what the code of conduct is in the context of this, and we need to also, you know, make it clear that this is going to be handled like you're emailing a council member. It's not going to be something that we're going to guarantee is going to be read out. If a council member wants to read one of these comments out because it emphasizes a point or it's really useful for the discussion or dialogue, that's up to them. It's just like they would with an email, right? If you want to come and present, that's what this microphone is for. That's what I would like to see. And any other discussion?
Now, on the civility rules, will there be a check that they've read them? I know nobody reads them, they just check it, but at least that way.
I think it's turning the terms on, they'll have to check that they read them, yeah. So,
Yeah, great.
But I guess it's part of like the posting process to say, I understand these terms. So.
Yep.
You know, I just thought something. We could have some sort of comment and said, and this forum is monitored for civility rules, and your post can be removed if they're violated.
Yeah, and that then becomes a question of like, hopefully we never need to do that.
Right. But it's just, if it's not posted, then that person could say, oh, what did I say that was, you know, and they can go back and look at it or something. So I just thought.
Are we allowed to do like show of hands? Like does anyone...
No, that's my idea. I mean, this could be a motion that we all say.
Well, no, but like,
or could just be
this is just like a poll. Like, have y'all seen a comment on there where you're like, that one should be removed?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't think I have, and maybe it's just, yeah. And maybe it's just
probably about 3 or 4.
Yeah. All right.
It's not a lot. No, I take that back. It's probably about closer to 7 or 8.
Okay.
I could probably show them to you.
How about you? You got an answer?
I'm gonna defer to Ketan.
Can I offer a suggestion and and some feedback on this? For the suggestion, instead of making a box that they have to check, why don't you put the rules of decorum that exist for council meetings and that are in the code? It's like 30.01, whatever it is, and 02, whatever those numbers are, verbatim. Put that at the front, so it's not something that's a pop-up screen that is less likely to be read. It's something that people have to read before they can comment, and it's up there, and say these same rules will apply to this. But I'll also make an observation. In 3 years that I was on council, we heard a lot of objectionable things, a lot of things that were directed towards people individually, which the code says it's not. There was one time we called a point of order as a council, and I did it. And as the one time, we did it once, and people voted on it in time. So no matter how much people think that people say things objectionable, But when it comes to actually saying that person needs to sit down and close their mouth, we don't do it because we take a very long and very liberal view of what people are allowed to say in the public square. So even if we were saying, these are things that I wouldn't say, I didn't like hearing them, that's different from saying, I would remove that post and hide it. And so even if we're saying that there's 5, 6, 7 things that I've seen that I wouldn't agree with, when it would actually come to voting on it to say, that person needs to sit down and close their mouth, I don't, based on the track record of what I saw when I was on council, that would probably not likely be the case. And it wasn't just abuse directed towards us. It was only when that person said something about another resident that was about that resident's kids where we said, okay, that's enough. And that's what it took to cross the line. It wasn't a criticism of staff. It wasn't a criticism of another council member that did it. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about what the bar that we've set in the past for something like that. It may have changed since then, but that's, I mean, I've even been sued for what I've said at a council meeting before, but that wasn't enough to cross the line at the time to call the point of order. So thank you.
Thank you. Council, we do need a motion to extend our meeting. We're at that magic hour. Councilor Reitz?
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilor Johnson?
I think I'm always the second on that.
You
could make the motion.
All those in favor of extending our meeting up till 10 o'clock, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right. So council, we don't have to take specific action on this. It could be just direction, that we want staff to change. If there's, certainly I think we can make, like I said, incremental changes and proceed with putting up more notice of what the rules are,
Yes.
whether that's a checkbox or in text, that's part of the structure of the message. And I would also suggest turning the support feature off for now. So, given that it has a weird limit, and I don't find that particularly useful. If that's sufficient, then I think we can move on past this agenda item.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you.
Okay. That doesn't require.
Yeah, just staff direction.
Direction
And,
of
and
staff, yeah.
Sylvia and I are going to look into, I would really prefer not to have to post the terms but every time I have to post something on that
No, just post
town
it.
hall, but it'll just be, we just need to look at the design. I think we have several options to
Great.
where we put the terms. So we'll look into that.
All right, council, that'll take us to agenda item number 9, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action on City Hall as a community center based on recommendation from Community and Economic Development Committee. And this is sponsored by Councilmember Reitz. Staff, do you want to give a quick overview of this item?
Sure, it's a recommendation from CED to convert City Hall to a community center. We've taken a look at the building plans, and there are some questions as to what can be done. So before we go and get everybody all excited, we'd like a small feasibility study not to exceed $10,000 to at least review the engineering and architectural component to understand what can and cannot happen to City Hall in terms of blowing out all the interior walls, et cetera, et cetera.
And Councilor Reitz, do you want to give a little bit more background from CED in terms of this?
Yes, we have, the committee has been looking at ways to utilize this center more, from game night to community gatherings to classes, et cetera. There are a lot of ways to be able to use this. And I know there's also quite a bit of interest in going back to people being able to rent it, but we would also need, that's a whole other ball game there with policies and things like that. But there are areas that could be looked at. In particular, the office space back there is kind of ratty looking, and it could use some opening up and some refreshing, and it would be nice to see what is actually feasible. We don't want to spend a lot of money on it, but just to open it up and make it a very inviting space where our residents can come, which I'll give our shameless invite to. Friday night is game night, and so it's to come to that and to come and enjoy each other's company and the community this Friday. Yep. So yes, so that's kind of where we're at. So.
And just as a follow-up, because I know representing Mayor Pro Tem, who brought this up at the last time we discussed this item, was he wanted to know whether we could, as part of this feasibility study, also get some more information on utilization of the space outside the building as part of the study.
That's a good idea.
And that might increase the cost, or at least, may want to be something we say, can we at least get some feedback on how this space might be used, including, I think there's residents that spoke tonight to say maybe that outdoor space could be repurposed a little bit to be better for X types of gatherings. I know Mayor Pro Tem was also particularly interested in, the idea of leveraging some of the space for things like a more community outdoor space, like a pool or something like that. But I think I'm interested in not just the interior, but also to a certain extent the property outside, to see is there a better way that we could integrate it with some of these recreational needs that have come up.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think we should broaden
So,
that. And,
so if that means, just increasing the
budget a bit.
the direction, maybe not necessarily budget, but just
Okay.
direction given to the engineering firm, and saying, we'd like to also include some of the exterior spaces, as part of this feasibility study, so we can get an understanding of like where some of the hard limits might be, right? Because we've got obviously driveways and roads and parking spaces and things like that, but there's some open space of flexibility.
So this $10,000 shouldn't take that into account.
Okay, so we may need to increase the budget if we're going to be doing something.
You may
more
need
beyond that.
to, yes, you may need to increase the budget. And this really is going to go back to the topic of the rules we set for ourselves, right? Changing this to community center, what does that mean in terms of parking and restrooms and yada, 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 yada. There are a number of cities who say in this particular area, you don't have to meet the parking, or you don't have to meet, X, Y, Z. But until I understand what it is exactly we can do, it's very hard to guide a path forward.
Any further discussion on this? I mean, we could also just start with this and then expand on it as we get more information too, especially as we get guidance from the ad hoc committee in terms of recreational spaces. If we start seeing things like amenities that are being requested, then it becomes an evaluation of where the best place to put those are, and that may cause us to rethink some of the current use of the city property we have.
Yep. So do I need to make a motion for that?
We can, and then we can open up for public for feedback, or we can do the public feedback first and then make a motion.
We can do public feedback.
Okay. Any members of the public wish to speak to this particular item?
I love the idea, Lisa, 40 Pillow Road, Lisa Versace, 40 Pillow Road. This is so important for our community. I don't know why we need $10,000 to do a survey, because it's an awesome space as it is. Don't we just need some furniture and to clean some areas out? And can the community help with that? Maybe an architect will provide some great ideas, but that we haven't thought of. But have we had an open brainstorm on this to get community ideas, or is that a part of the $10,000?
Well, the CED committee has discussed this, and part of it is opening up that area here, is so we need some sort of structural information.
Can we have 5 o'clock wine nights here? Wine at 5?
Yeah, we'd love
Current
to.
policy
it's
is
proven
no
that-
alcohol, but we could change that.
Oh, I might have some power up there. to
I
do
will
that.
say that at game night, the prevailing comment was, "We will BYOB," but I didn't say that out loud.
Oh, great, okay.
Okay, good to know.
So, okay, so Friday night, we're just gonna set up a bunch of tables in here, a little round, and then we bring our own games.
We
and-
have games.
Okay,
You can bring your own.
I mean, great, love it. I fully support this idea. I think it's wonderful, and I think it'll really get a lot of use.
Councilmember Litchfield?
I'd like to move to approve this feasibility study in the amount not to exceed $10,000, and make the following, or the corresponding adjustment ordinance passing to amend the budget.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the $10,000 feasibility study with the budget amendment also. Is there a second? Councilmember Reeds?
I will second.
It would be budget amendment number 8, not number 9.
Oh, that's right.
Just a correction.
Number 8. I think in the backup it's, yeah. Okay. Further discussion on this item, council? Councilmember Johnson?
I have it's on a notepad, but I remember it, and it's like things that it's like my list of things. So, and one of them says, what are we buying? So like, what comes out of this? For $10,000, like who is getting $10,000? What are their credentials? What are they handing over to us?
It would be a task order to our current engineering firm, much like we did the Luck Design Group for Upper Cougar Creek. It's a task order to that firm to review the architectural and engineering and land use. So one of the feasibility study is idea number one, blow out the entire space altogether. Okay, so what does that entail? Idea number two is, well, only partition off. So there's been a couple of ideas that are out there floating. You'd get responses as to whether or not those are possible.
Would an architect be able to bring that more information versus an engineer?
Perhaps our engineer said he can do it, so.
They normally will work with whatever outside consultant they need. You know, with Upper Cougar Creek, they found
That's why
a landscape
10,000.
architect.
Yeah,
So,
and I like an engineer doing it because like they might not have, like, they might not be driven by like the art of it, and instead it's just like, well, this is what you can do. You know, it's just like you can. Can they also, Duncan? You and I did a real good job laying out wire, but like, there's certain things where we just need to like kind of clean it up because that looks like.
yes.
Different. That's, we are already planning. Dakota's our new superintendent. He's working on getting all of that. In fact, I think we're going to be looking at a day in July. We've been getting quotes to do everything that we need to do to finish that, paint, do what we need to do with the maintenance out there. So there is a plan over the summer to ramp up all of that.
Awesome, thanks.
So I think in general, or specifically to your question, what would we get? We would get a report similar to the report that the engineering firm generated for the Upper Cougar Creek. That would basically detail out some of the options. So that's what we'd expect. And is that sufficient? Then now's the time to say aye or nay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weren't we supposed to get sunshades? Are they up there? They're up there. No. Wow. Where are those coming from?
All right. Any further discussion on this before we vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, council, the last item we have is an executive session, so we'll need a motion to convene into executive session. Councilmember Johnson? Sorry, did you want to comment on this? I thought I'd open it up for public comment, but I
No,
didn't see
it's
you.
about executive session. If I hang around till you're done, am I going to learn what property you're considering selling, or?
If we
because
take any
there's no
action,
vote.
if
It
we take
doesn't
any,
say-
there will be no votes in executive session. If we take any action, it'll be done out here on the dais.
But it's not in the agenda that you might take action. Can you do that?
It says possible action in open session.
Oh, it does, possible action?
Yeah, executive session items with possible action in open session.
Okay, and then it would be identified.
Yeah.
Correct. That, and then the mayor would open it up for public comments if they made any motion.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Councilmember Johnson, move to executive session.
I move we move to
executive session. Is there a second?
Second, yeah.
Oh, okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are going to move to executive session at 9:13 p.m. and we'll reconvene. back. Okay. We can reconvene. All right. All right, we are reconvening into open session at 9:30 p.m. Got the little tap there. There is no additional action we're taking tonight. I know it kept everybody in suspense. So we can adjourn if there's a motion to do so. Councilmember
moved.
Litchfield,
Second?
seconded by Councilmember
No,
Rosengard.
no, no.
I saw a hand, but I heard your voice. So Councilmember Rosengard, second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, we are adjourned at 9:31 p.m.
I was trying to ask somebody to second it.